Hello, my beauties and bees, and welcome to the show. This is going to be my first ever Sting debate review with a special guest. We are reviewing tonight just happened recently, just the other day, the James Tour and Dave Farina debate. It was at Rice University. There was a live audience. It was a couple hours long. It was quite a show, if you can say anything about it. It was quite the show. We actually have some special guest hosts on here with me tonight, one of which was actually at the debate when it was live. So let me go ahead and introduce. They need any introduction. Let me introduce Aron Ra and Dr. Jay Bundy. Hello, guys.
How you do?
Hello. Mr. Rock, can you actually quickly tell us how you found out about this event and ended up, and maybe just what it was like in the atmosphere?
I think I heard about it initially from Dave,
Okay.
and was very excited that I wanted to be in it. I mean, I have heard the creationists going on about how, Dr. Tour was the man to beat, yet Dr. Tour's argument was that we're clueless, that we don't have a clue. And
Yeah.
that's been the creationist argument all along. That's always. So when I debate a creationist, and if the topic is beneficial mutations, they're going to argue the minutia, try to find any excuse for how a mutation might not always be beneficial, or it might not be completely beneficial, or it might have a downside.
Right.
So try to find any excuse to get out of admitting that a mutation is beneficial, or likewise, if there's no transitional species, well, then they'll argue that I can't verify that fossil had any kids, much less than different kids. But then we have to go into the definition of what a transitional species is, which means that it doesn't have to have had any kids because it's supposed to be intermediate in its morphological characteristics and ideally also its chronological placement in the fossil record. But that's the kind of minutia that they have to argue, because it's what I wrote in the book, The Foundational Falsehoods of Creationism. There are certain lies creationists cannot admit to.
Mm-hmm.
And having a clue, well, myriad clues. And one of the first is what I tried to bring up in the Q&A, which if I had been helping Farina prepare for this debate, I would have opened with that. James Tour is a young earth creationist. He doesn't accept deep time. He doesn't accept any evidence from geohistory, from taxonomy, from embryology, from genetic, whole genome comparisons, molecular clock, none of it. He rejects all of that so that he can make believe in a magic fable. That's it. So, I mean, I would have, if I was helping Farina prepare for because I wouldn't have done this debate myself.
Yeah.
You have to have at least have had Farina has competence in chemistry, which Tour kept arguing that he didn't, even though Farina pointed out that many of Tour's students have to use Farina's study guide.
That was wonderful. That was beautiful. Yes.
Yeah. So
yes.
that was one thing that Farina did right. I have some complaints.
Sure.
To be honest, I mean, I tried to talk to Farina about that over drinks afterward, but it wasn't like it wasn't like it was he and I and some light piano music in the background. No, we were in a student bar where it was extremely loud, and so was the music, and there's a huge crowd of people, so there wasn't really much of an opportunity to talk to the man. And I lament that I didn't maybe take a more proactive stance before the debate to talk about the importance of the debate and what were the important things to hit. So if the topic of the debate is that we don't have a clue, all you need to do is produce a clue.
Yes.
Yeah, and the question that I brought up in the Q&A was a clue.
They got totally rejected and dismissed, by the way, that Tour didn't even want to touch.
Yes.
He can't accept, and I wasn't allowed to press because they only have the room for so long. They gave me 30 seconds to give the thing. They're trying to hustle everybody out of there. They're not letting you do follow-up questions. This is a single question. You don't get to pursue it. So all I can do is say, okay, he dodged. I have to leave it. And so, of course, the intelligent design people took that as a victory score on their side, that when he dodged, that I can't press.
Yeah,
I'm
you only
not
get that
allowed to
time.
press.
Absolutely.
So,
It was a great question, and it also brought up issues with his rejection of a natural explanation. In other words, no matter what he comes up with, he's not going to be able to fit it into the foundation of biology, which for all people who are not ideologically opposed is an evolutionary framework, which is also, the bit I had to add, which was his rejection of selection playing a role in all of this, which is, of course, nonsense. But yeah,
well,
I
how
totally
about
agree
when
with
it brought
you
up that they couldn't have
on that.
you can't show an autocatalysis or synthesis of a natural synthesis for ribonucleotides. Farina produces the study, and he says, well, they're not functional. Well, Farina produces a study that says they're functional. Well, they're not fully functional. Well, how much further do we need to push the goalpost back?
It's that scene from Futurama where he's like looking for the missing, where the orangutan and Professor are you, and he's looking for the missing link. Well, we haven't
Yeah.
found the one in between this and that. That's what Farina was doing exactly. Or not Farina. That's what Tor was doing to Farina.
I apologize, Doctor, because you were in the midst of asking a question, and I jumped in. And
It's totally
also,
fine.
people, most of the people I think in Bree's audience is going to know who I am. Introduce yourself, please.
Oh, hi. All right, cool. I'm for those that don't know me, I'm Dr. J. Bundy. I'm currently a postdoctoral researcher at the University of Minnesota in the ecology, evolution, and behavior department. Work in the Travisano lab, where we primarily do experimental evolution with various systems. Most people work with microbes like bacteria or yeast. Study things like the evolution of multicellular. Some of them do research on the origins of life vis-a-vis, precellular evolution and things like that. I work primarily with computational systems like Avita. So I do digital evolution, where I use software programs basically to test evolutionary theory, which is the great thing about my work is being able to actually test evolution in proper experiments, which is why creationists have such a problem with people who do research like I do. I was trained at Michigan State in the Lenski lab, where they run the longest running evolution experiment in the history of science. My work is very much similar, but I'm able to expand the range of questions to things like sexual selection and cultural evolution. And so yeah, that's most of my work. Before that, I did biological anthropology. I got a master's in biological anthropology at Penn State. So did have to do some of the training people might be familiar with. Gutzit Gibbon, most of her work their stuff is biological anthropology. So I have some backgrounds there. My master's thesis was on sexual selection in humans and men's voices in particular. So yeah, that's a little bit about my background. I have a YouTube channel. I'm a musician. I do counter apologetics, and also do a lot of coverage of like politics and social issues. So give me a follow at Pocket Locker 86. Also, I did debate Kent Hovind, and Gutzit Gibbon covered that. So some people may have seen that. But yeah, glad to be here.
Well, you sound like quite the Renaissance man, sir.
I'm trying, man. Just out here, and I have to say I like a lot of your work, right? And it's cool because it's been relevant. Like I remember literally being in grad school and talking to people as we were teaching taxonomy and how to do phylogenetics and how tree thinking works, for instance, right? And being like, have you guys? All right, let's talk about, are we actually monkeys though? Do you guys you seen this Aron Ross stuff, right? And I was like, I don't know if he realizes, but like these are active conversations in the field, right? And I'm like, God, people are so lucky that they're getting this, literally grad level conversation on YouTube for free. So yeah, man, just keep on keeping on, brother.
The phylogeny challenge it's scientific. It really is. I love that you've coined that and brought that to the field, because it really does hold up to scientific scrutiny, and it's beautiful.
Well, thank you very much for that, AJ. But while you guys are extolling the virtues of a series of YouTube videos. I mean, I'm a science communicator. I'm more in favor of the scientists.
Sure, sure.
So
Yeah,
you're working, doctor, with in the Linsky lab, right? So
yeah, yeah.
how do you deal with the reality denial? Well, first of all, how would you describe that world's longest experiment? To produce biodiversity, to demonstrate macroevolution within, what was it, E.
Yeah,
coli?
yeah, E. coli. Yeah, it's actually, so it was a rather simple experiment. He took E. coli, which are capable of asexual reproduction, so you can clone them and essentially get the same exact genotype. They're in a very simple experimental environment, which I describe as salt water with sugar in it, the primary sugar being glucose. And so he took 12 clones of a single genotype and put them in 12 separate flasks. You do a little bit of a plate selection where they're capable of growing on a particular sugar that you can select for, and basically it's a neutral marker, so you can make some of them appear white, some of them appear more pinkish red on colonies, so you can so you get basically half of them with this Aron minus phenotype and half of them with this Aron plus phenotype. And then they just evolve. Every day somebody comes in the lab, they grow up, they go through about 6 to 7 generations of growth in a day, and then somebody comes and takes they've been sitting in a, what do we call them, incubator overnight, shaken. And so somebody takes a pipette and takes 1% out, puts it in an entirely new flask so that they have a fresh food source to exhaust, and the process starts all over again. And it's been going on for close to 35 years now, over 30 years, and over 75,000 generations. But what it amounts to is natural selection in an artificial environment. So you have a tightly controlled lab environment, but the researchers are not actively selecting for the most fit genotypes or anything like that. They're just coming along and randomly selecting, hey, whoever ends up in this 1% transfer is ready to go. And so the evolution just happens de novo. Go ahead, Bree.
Oh, sorry. I was going to say, is the solution thermogenetic, or is it the bacteria
itself? The solution
itself
is literally salt water, so it's water with a bunch of salts in it that help stabilize their metabolic, and then just the only source primarily is the food. Although of course the big sort of macroevolution is that one of the lineages evolved to metabolize the citrate, which is one of the other substances that is in the environment, which they cannot normally do under those conditions. And so it's been called Darwin's missing evidence, and it's something creationists actively attacked. Actually, a big part of my personal deconversion, I can't say, I don't know how much of a role it plays in deconversion because it's such a long process, but it certainly played a role in me no longer identifying as a Christian. Was a creationist organization manipulated a student group on campus to host a creationist summit where they challenged Rich Lenski and my teaching mentor, Rob Pennock, and the creator of the software, Avita, that I use, Charles Afria, to like this big debate, even with this chest pounding, like, unless they're scared or whatever. Of course, they're not going to attend an event like that. But it was the sort of manipulation and abuse of a student group was something that a lot of us found, reprehensible, right? And it was sort of time for me to check out and say, I don't want anything to do with an identity that would motivate people to behave this way, which does kind of tie back to my critique of this debate, where what I was coming to terms with through my education was, how serious about science are you going to be? Are you going to be this person who goes to grad school, learns this naturalistic model of the world, literally is responsible for doing research and teaching the most powerful theory in the history of science, that being evolution, but then you're going to turn around and in your personal life act as though you're not really sure if that really explains it. Maybe there is, right? And I was like, I can't. I cannot stomach that hypocrisy. And so there is a way in which the fact that there's people like James Tour out there who, I don't care what scientific discipline you're in, you know, science is about finding natural explanations for natural phenomena. You build your career on that, you build your credibility on that, and then you turn around and you poke holes at somebody else's scientific work, knowing you have no alternative. You're providing no. He kept saying, "Give me some facts. Give me some facts." He provided no facts or evidence or studies or anything the entire time. I mean, and so it is the type of situation where I would impress upon people at home: do not walk away from what you saw thinking you need to brush up on your biochemistry, because someone so thoroughly unqualified can't give you homework. And you going and doing homework based on their BS that is not even part of the actual scientific conversation is you taking the bait and going on a fool's errand. So yeah, that's my piece, but thanks.
Yeah. Let me give you where I was going with my question there. So the world's longest, or science's longest running experiment, you're showing biodiversity, you're showing macroevolution, you're showing the emergence of new traits, new information, new characteristics in the lab. The creationists can't admit any of that. So what do they say? They say, well, it's if it started out E. coli, then it's still E. coli.
Yes, 100%.
Right.
Or they pretend that we, rigged the system, or that we,
it's still bacteria. Even if you even if you have a new species names for the varieties that you've produced in the lab, so you have the same genus name perhaps, but you have new species, so you've got new speciation, but it's still bacteria, right?
Yeah.
And so, of course, it is. I heard this study cited in a court case where in a Senate hearing, rather, it was a state Senate in Louisiana, and they were arguing about whether they should teach evolution. And of course, the scientific team is explaining that evolution has been observed in the lab,
right?
And they cite Linsky's
and this is
study.
One of the common examples, yes, yeah.
Yeah, and then the senator. Now think about this. This is somebody who was elected to office. The senator asked, did the bacteria turn into people?
What?
That's unbelievable.
That's the same guys that's bringing the snowballs in, saying, "Hey, no climate change. Look, a snowball." Fucking idiots. Sorry.
That's unbelievable.
It's too early in the stream for me to say something like that, but I can't help it. They're fucking idiots.
Yeah, but the point is important, because you do still hear them stick to the talking point that you can't demonstrate it in a lab, and you can't demonstrate it through proper scientific experiment. Right? That's what you always say. Right? They'll always hit you with the line: science is what we can observe. Science is what we can, and you can't observe evolution. And so, just so the audience knows, the experiment has been hailed as Darwin's missing evidence, in the sense that Darwin did not have that type of direct experimental evidence to support his theory at the time. And so Aron's right on. They actually have to deny it, and that's why they go out of their way to attack it. And when, the people they're attacking are your mentors and advisors who make sure you don't skip meals and that you get your training so you can have a career in science, it's probably going to rub you the wrong way. Yeah, so
Linsky's study is one of several that showed macroevolution, the evolution of new species in the lab under controlled conditions. There have been others where speciation has been observed in the field under controlled conditions, and in many ways verified in naturally controlled conditions in some cases.
Yes, like the grants and the
natural and artificial speciation.
Yeah, and so many creationists will admit that speciation happens. They used to say, when I was a kid, before anybody knew about this, they said, well, nobody's ever seen the evolution of a new species, so therefore evolution is debunked. But then now they found out that there have been many times directly observed and documented evolution of new species. And so now they say, well, yeah, speciation happens all the time, no big deal, but that's just microevolution. No, it's fucking not. The evolution of a new species is macroevolution. Variation
Right.
within a species, that's micro. Variation
Right.
between species, or in new species at or above the species level, that means including speciation. You've just admitted now openly that speciation happens. You fully accept speciation happens. That means you accept macroevolution happens. But no, they won't say that. They can't say that. I've shown many times that, according to all of the definitions provided in all these different academic institutions, this is what macroevolution is, but they can't. The game of semantics is that they have to draw an arbitrary line. They've decided that it's going to be between micro and macro. They don't know what either one of those words mean.
Right.
But they're going to draw a line between them because they got to make believe in something that they know is not really true. People have admitted to me over and over again, why does it have to be true before I can believe it? Why can't I believe whatever I want to, whether it's true or not?
I mean, they're asking for your permission to be dishonest, basically.
Well, isn't that what faith is?
It is.
If you're going to
Fake
tell
it
me
till you
that
make
something
it.
is, if you're going to tell me that something is true, you don't know if it's true, but you're going to assert baseless speculation as if it's a fact, right? It's one thing if you say that you believe something, but when you say that X is true, or that you know that X is true, when there's no way anybody can know that, or when I know for a fact that God is real, you're going to make a statement like that. Well, now you're making an assertion that requires an evidential backing, and if you're stating things as fact that are not evidently nor even possibly true, there's two ways to describe that. Either the word faith or the word lies, and I think both apply.
So with this, because I'm sure we want to get to the debate, what was your take on the audience, right? Because to me, that's what you're just saying is about them, right? Because they're the people that need to buy into this, and they're the ones cheering for him, right? And they're kind of already there for him to say pointless, or clueless, and cheer at that. Who did you think they were? Because it almost felt like, were these his actual students? Like who there buys into that? Because it's very embarrassing for the university.
The rumor that I heard when I was in the room was that Tour had conjured his whole congregation to turn out for this thing.
I heard that too. I heard.
Now this was a full room. This was a full room, and I was trying to get there an hour early, and I ended up getting there only like 20 minutes early, which was frustrating to me. But I mean, I had really tried to get there an hour early, but I'm coming all the way from Dallas.
I was wondering how much of a trip it was for you. It sounds like a little bit of a hike, yeah.
Yeah, and so I was barely able to get in there. Matter of fact, they blocked the door ahead of me, and they said, no, I have to be in this room.
Wow.
And I argued with them to let me in that room, because they were saying, there's no more room. I don't need a chair. Let me stand in the corner. I have to be in this room.
Damn.
And they finally let me in. But there were 80. I don't know what the number was. Somebody told me that there were like 80 other people in another room, and I think the overflow room must have been bigger than that. But this room was completely full, and now there's another room adjacent to this where people are watching it on live stream. And what I'd heard from somebody in the overflow room was that the majority of the people in the overflow were his Tour's sycophants.
Wow.
Yeah, so I'm glad that the science students seem to be, for the most part, in the main room.
Okay. I was very curious about that.
I had a question about that too, like, because it looked like, watching it live, and we'll see that there was a like heckling going on that was just not even being regulated by anybody. That the people were just there.
Here's the way these things go. This is why it's kind of pointless to do a public debate like this. I've debated a number of religious nut jobs, and the sycophants, when it goes on video, you can see the comments. They declare their guy the winner before either side has said anything. Or if I'm giving the first presentation and I've just done I'm starting my introduction, they declare him the winner. He's following me. He hasn't said anything yet. They haven't even heard my presentation yet, but they're going to say their guy is the winner. And then when the guy has fucking nothing except insanity, and I think I've shown everything to show that this guy's completely out of his fucking mind, then they will say, well, he owned you. How the fuck? How did he own me? How can you walk into something and just get every fucking thing wrong? Everything wrong. Absolutely everything. You don't score a single point. Can you win a war when you lose every man on every battlefield?
Yeah. Speaking of getting heckled for over a debate, I think that this person might have something to say about it. Hey, Dave.
How's it going, guys?
So yeah, thank you for popping in. We haven't even got into the debate. I was kind of stalling until we got a chance to chat with you. But Aron and Jay have been keeping the audience entertained with some science facts, so it's been great. But yeah, glad you're here. How do you feel after your epic debate?
Pretty good. I mean, I definitely got him to behave in a really pathetic and ludicrous way for all to observe. So, I mean, yeah, it was fun to, I had to push his buttons in order to get that kind of a reaction. I suppose it was to be expected that not a single follower of his would listen to anything I had to say. So that's not really a surprise, but I definitely got him to behave in the most unprofessional manner that I think he's ever behaved. So,
have you ever been called Mr. Farina so many times in a little 2-hour period?
No, but I mean, I don't care about that. I mean, I've seen other people being like, "Oh, why don't they call him this or that?" It's like, it's not. I'm Mr. Farina's fine.
Well,
that didn't
I just thought
me.
it was like he was talking to you like you were a student up at the blackboard. Right. Yeah.
Well, he pretended he was going to be talking
from
to him like he's
James.
a student, but you can't get away with talking to a student like that.
I was just going to say, for the record, because I want to have an academic career. It's what I'm training for, and I teach and work with students, and I felt like again, he was an embarrassment to his universities, and universities have a history, right? They have a history of being toxic work environments that are basically exclusive because there's some old dude, right, like him, who thinks they can talk to anybody any old way they want to, and he was almost like one of the professors out of like a God's Not Dead like propaganda type film, right? but playing for the other team or something. And it was just really crazy. But I was like, no, this is embarrassing. And I actually felt the need, even when I was like getting ready for this and watching it, to like pause and be like, no, this is something. If I saw another faculty member doing, I don't care what level of tenure they have, I don't care what level of rank in the department they have, I'm coming after that person because I don't think they belong here. I don't think they should be teaching, and I don't think there should be anything to protect them. No, there's no way. That's how. Right.
Yeah, let alone the fact that he's lying and slandering researchers. I mean, there's so many layers of unprofessionality to his behavior.
And he said he treats his students that way. That was what he said. He said, "This is Someone asking the audience, "Is this the way you talk to your students?" And he said, "Yes." He cannot. There's no way.
I shouted at them belligerently.
Yes, he had the audacity to defend it as synonymous with academic rigor, and it. I don't know how much you guys get into this stuff, but we deal with a lot of these controversial apologists out here when it comes to social and political issues, right? And it becomes the same way that basically they think they can insult and attack people and wrap it up. Well, no, around here we challenge everybody's ideas and we tell everybody and it's a total excuse to take a moral high ground when really all you're doing is being an asshole and breaking the social decorum because you don't care about other people, clearly.
We got PZ Myers in the live chat here too, and he works in academia as well. University of Minnesota, which he shouted when you said that, he shouted it out. But he's agreeing with you about the Dr. Tor's behavior.
I appreciate
reflection
that,
on those working in academia.
Yeah. And I want to make a clarification point too, because when I agreed to do the show, I do a lot of podcasts and stuff, and so I'm not always on the ball about what the topic is all the time. So it's going to be a little bit of a double play for me because I'm supposed to do a critique with Dave on this same debate later this month, and so I don't want to be like repeating a lot of what I was saying before, and I'm also not. I don't want to entirely praise Dave. I have criticisms, as he heard when we went for drinks afterward. There was some things that I wasn't happy with. I mean, one of the things, like I said, my question that I wanted to put, let's establish that we have a clue. That's all we need. One. Tour's argument is that we don't have a single clue, and then he tried to redefine what a clue is, but he tried to redefine what he said that you have to explain all of these things that he laid out. You have to explain all of them, or you've explained nothing. So
one clue
it's like that presuppositionalist argument. if you don't know everything, you don't know anything. That's kind of where he was
That's
going
not
with
a clue, that's a verdict.
Right.
that.
Right. Yeah.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It was a pretty
Clue.
patently absurd topic, which is typical of the way these things are framed.
I actually had a question about the title of the debate. Did you agree to that title?
I not only agreed, I forced him to do that because he wanted to be like, can science explain the origin of life? Which would have been like, oh, you don't know exactly what happened, then you lose. And so I suggested this one, and he pushed back initially. He's like, well, that I don't want to do that. It's like, well, that's funny because you shout exactly that all over the internet all the time. So are you admitting that it's an indefensible position? And if so, why do you say it all the time? So I forced him of course it didn't end up mattering because he ended up, doing his whole pageantry no matter what. But
Sure.
Yeah.
I would love to hear what Aron thought maybe could have done better, only because I think it's useful for all of us watching.
Aron wants to critique him on their own stream.
Oh,
though,
you want to
so
wait till
saying.
I understand.
Yeah.
I understand.
Yeah.
I'm with you.
So
We'll,
I don't
we'll check it out. We'll check it out.
This is a
We'll
review
check
of
it out.
Tour's argument, is what we're doing tonight. So
Yeah.
Fantastic. Let's do it.
and then Aron and Dave can do their own.
Tour said something that I thought was stunningly stupid when he described abiogenesis as a group of molecules come together, like when lightning strikes a mud puddle or something like that. A group of molecules comes together, and then they turn into slithering creatures, and then those molecules crawl out of the water. He's not describing like evolution succinctly, like 500 billion years. 500 million years worth of evolution in a single sentence. That's not what he's talking about abiogenesis. That's his description.
Here's the thing. This is why I brought quotes, because I like to catch him. That quote, he gives different versions of that quote all the time, but he does it when he's lecturing his like at a Christian group who none of them have any clue what he's talking about. So he feels justified in lying more than usual. So I brought that quote to press him on it and say, why did you say this? This is what the textbooks say. None of them say anything like this. And he just blah, 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 blah. He just fumbled. I mean, he knew that he knew I had him. He knows he's lying. But I've heard him give other versions of that quote. I've heard 5 different versions of that quote with varying levels of stupidity. And I brought the dumbest one I could find, because why not?
The fact that he backed that's why I brought the question that I brought in the Q&A, that I wish Dave had opened with something like that. Let's see what will you admit, what will James Tour admit is evidence of anything. Obviously, he's thrown out geological history, he's thrown out taxonomy, phylogenetics, embryology, whatever. He doesn't accept deep time, apparently. And he's not going to give any. When you criticize a scientific theory, you don't just get to say nuh-uh. You have to show a better explanation. So when we teach something, they still teach Dalton's theory and Dalton's model and Bohr's model, right? These are not complete. We know that they're not accurate about everything, but they're useful in some applications. You can't criticize the one thing we have that works and replace it with nothing that doesn't.
Right. I was thinking of a witness who shows up and defends that someone didn't commit a crime, believing that they know who did. They know who committed the crime. They should be willing to present evidence of how they know this other person committed the crime, but they won't. And it's patently absurd, which is why it was important to be brought out that he is a creationist, because you don't have these conversations amongst reasonable students or reasonable scientists. And it's again, he does have an alternative answer, but it's a wholly scientifically untenable one. So he doesn't want the people in the audience to be made aware of exactly why he's here. So he is just lying. And I got to say this repeatedly. this is a really bad look for this university, for this department, for this student body. It is embarrassing to have faculty behave this way.
Yeah, there's one other important thing that I'd like to bring up, and I should probably let Dave talk, but I do have this one last thing that I wanted to mention. Tour has a PhD in chemistry, so he's really good at this one thing. So he's going to write out, his chemistry on the board. Now, the studies that I was reading from like Sutherland, for example, when they talk about how you have repeated cycles of inundation, irradiation, and dehydration, and you have these, I forget what the constituents were, but they become, as the study said, that they become increasingly more complex until there's a certain sequence where they add this phosphate and spontaneously cause ribonucleotides. So this is the way the study's written out. Now, how would you write that on the board the way Tour wants you to do? There would be no way to represent that study. How do you represent the chemistry that's written out? Tour is expecting Farina to go up and show how it's increasing in complexity, and then you add the phosphate. Anything Farina could have done, he could have done it absolutely correctly, and Tour would have just called him out that you can't do that.
Yeah,
there's no way that Tour could have performed that stunt and it be satisfactory.
Yeah, everything about the chalkboard was complete pageantry. It was actually very clever on his part because he knows that his viewers are stupid enough to fall for it. He basically just wrote some amino acids on the board, which a freshman undergrad could do. It's not impressive at all. And then went, why can't you write anything? It's like, I can write amino acids. You're asking for the research that's in the paper. Do you want me to copy a scheme from one of these papers onto the chalkboard for no reason whatsoever? Why would I do that? There's literally no reason for me to use chalk, nor him.
And it looks like
2023.
It looks to his audience like you're dodging, but as you said, that's a clever trick because there's no way to represent increasing complexity.
Yeah, I have to draw mineral surfaces, and then I have to write the mechanism of heterogeneous catalysis. I mean, it doesn't make any sense. It's insane to think that I should be writing with chalk instead of showing schemes from research. But his viewers are very dumb, and they fell for it.
You did cleverly continuously point out how he was trying to waste time and run out the clock. I rarely see this done enough in these type of debates. And the chalk thing was just another tactic. It was something he knew was very time consuming, a big bunch of hand waving, but would make him look like he was doing something. Also, I also found that, again, for most students who were trying to understand this the way you would if you were genuinely curious, the things he were drawing were kind of, he was telling on himself. He was telling how dishonest he is. Because let's say none of those experiments happened and you didn't have any of those research. He's basically showing, yeah, we know there's a pathway. Yeah, we know that, we have these chemicals. We know there's simpler versions of them. We know along the way to organic processes, these things come together or these processes happening. Like most of us, to then turn around and say, but if you haven't observed it in a particular way to meet my satisfaction, it's just a fundamentally dishonest way to frame what's possible or even what he's writing on the board. So it was all tactics to me, and that really bothered me. I was like, he's clearly showing you he understands just enough to make sure you don't understand. Like it's ridiculous.
Yeah, the whole thing was just a desperate attempt to hang on to his flock, knowing that he's in way over his head with lies. There was zero attempt at any good faith discussion of research.
Also, quickly, Aron, I remember you debating with Dr. Thompson, Sal Cardova, who I utterly despise. And it was the same thing, where the tactic is to jump to some graduate level vocabulary that, again, I can't emphasize this enough, is not actually what's debated in the field, because the people in the actual field are not busy chasing down distractions from Creationist, right? But it's to go in to language that is over the head of the audience, so that they can, poke holes at their opposition. And it was very obvious that this is the same exact tactic, But it was really interesting how he did it even more so in your debate. So one of the things was he treated it like a legal proceeding, right? Where he was supposed to treat, it sounded like, your previous videos on this as discovery, and then you're not supposed to bring anything into the debate that he has not had the chance to review as though this is a trial. And then it was clear that what he did was take your stuff, find something he just thinks you haven't covered or found out, and just hammer that home, even though you were clearly prepared for that. And then he's literally going, no, you can't do that. No,
show me the research. No, you can't show me that research. Yeah,
yes. And then at the end, admitting that he's bringing this to the masses so he can sidestep the peer review process and go around people who can call his bluff. So it was again, very embarrassing for the university.
Hey guys, I actually have to jump off. I got to help with the kids. I just wanted to say hi and everything. But
appreciate you.
Yeah, absolutely. So I'll see you guys.
Thank you for dropping in, Dave.
Absolutely.
Glad to chat with you.
Great to chat with you, guys.
Glad you could make it for a moment at least.
See you later, for sure.
Later.
Yeah. And for anybody in the live chat who doesn't know or follow Dave, I mean, obviously, if you're on my channel, I reference his material all the time when I'm talking about different things like geology and biology. But his channel's linked down below, as are Dr. Bundy's and Aron's. So if you aren't subscribed
I
to
say
them,
that, Sal Cordova, you're gonna debate something. It's a good idea to have a clue what it is before you start trying to criticize it. So I got Sal to understand what the definition of evolution was and to admit that it does happen. But it wasn't until I said, okay, so you accept that evolution does happen. And then there was like a scratch record noise in his head, it seemed, where he realized that he had just admitted that evolution happens. And he can't admit that because he needs to talk about this other thing that he doesn't understand this either. Right. And his whole argument is to say that we don't understand it, but what he's talking about isn't concordant. If he can't show why it would be an issue, all he can say is, you haven't explained this. But he doesn't know what it is that we haven't explained. That's the remarkable thing. And he doesn't know what evolution is, but he's arguing against it.
Right. And Dr. Tor is guilty of this.
I would be surprised if Sal Cordova had ever done a debate after that. Certainly nobody should have platformed him after that.
You guys did a great job. Are
you guys ready to dig into this?
We are ready.
All right. I'm going to try to bypass all the introduction stuff here and go. We'll start at, I think, let's see.
Evening, everyone, and welcome to Rice University for a debate.
Who hosts the YouTube channel Professor Dave Explains. To my left is none other than
Mr. Farina, as my guest, welcome to Rice University. Unlike Mr.
Is that loud enough for you guys?
I have never been in a debate before. So if it appears that I am not a skilled debater, it's an accurate assessment. A major hurdle for the origin of life research is the origin and persistence of enantiopure molecules. The building blocks of the building blocks, as I call them. Enantiopurity means that one mirror image of a molecule prevails to the exclusion of the other. This includes 19 of the 20 amino acids, the monomeric sugars, the nucleotides, and the lipids. But for the sake of getting through, I am conceding tonight to my opponent all those small molecules in 100% enantiomeric purity. They are yours.
Also, guys, at any point you hear anything you want to respond to or comment on, you just tell me to pause and I'll pause it. Also, I got a super chat. Thank you. Dr. Dino says, hey, you Bree, this is this an open panel? No, it's not an open panel. Sorry. Not Dr. Dino as in Kent Hovind, but yeah, if not, have fun. All right.
No, I'm afraid that before we go any further, I'm not going to be able to sit through the whole debate again.
Yeah.
So I'm going to have to bail myself.
Yeah. Okay. I thank you for popping in and engaging and giving your feedback on it. If you got to go, you got to go.
I apologize for that. I wasn't expecting to like have to watch the whole debate again.
No. It's totally fine. It's totally
Yeah.
fine.
Yeah.
Is there anything you definitely let us know if there's anything you wanna say here before?
Do you
No,
want to jump?
I-
Do you want to jump to your question and his response so you can rebut that? I can do that. I can give you a chance to do that before we close out if you got a minute.
I think I already mentioned that. The reason what I was going for, to try to get him to accept any of the science, and he just wouldn't. As you pointed out, he just dodged it.
Yeah.
So there's no reason to play that either.
All right. All right.
Yeah,
Well,
no worries.
All right. So thank you, everyone.
Yeah,
Sorry
yeah.
to leave so soon.
No worries.
Yeah,
Thanks for
no,
coming in.
you've been here for almost an hour, almost an hour now. So thank you, Aron. Always great to have you on. Like I said about Dave, check out Aron. His link's down below. Yeah. All right.
Thank you
Have a
kindly.
good night. Uh-huh.
All right.
Bye.
Thanks. Bree, you want to go from somebody's intro? I don't know if it was Dave's or Tours or whoever.
Yeah, we were on Tour's intro here.
Yeah, sure.
Mr. Farina, as
Yeah,
my,
we were
okay, but I'll continue now. In any case, I'm here defining clueless in the context of my typical usage. Let me open up this document. Got to do it. I mean, this is just life, you know. I teach in this room, so I'm used to this. This just happens. Okay. So I'm defining clueless in the context of my typical usage. We cannot solve any of the 5 criteria needed to make a living cell. None of these can be solved. Mr. Farina has complained that I am a religious man. I'm not just religious, I'm deeply religious. Or as he puts it, I'm a, quote, super Jesus guy, unquote. While that's a label that I gladly embrace, and I believe that the Bible is God's word, I never appeal to that book of authority in my academic lectures or scientific discussions. Never, unless specifically asked about my religious convictions, like in a church or a religious podcast, I never couple those to my scientific criticisms of the origin of life research. I will not appeal to the Bible, to God, to miracles, to Jesus, to God of the gaps tonight. Often, origin of life researchers have a time of the gaps appeal, where they will say something to the effect, over millions of years, such and such happened. Those bedtime stories that are devoid of any precise chemistry may as well start with, once upon a time. So I hope that my opponent will likewise not appeal to ill-defined time of the gaps arguments, and that he'll stay strictly on the scientific data, the data. As for me, I will stick to the data. The topic tonight is not about me, it's whether there is a valid hypothesis to make a living cell on a mindless early Earth. In discussing scientific data, it's
Bree,
not a matter of deception or lies. It is a matter.
All right, so just a couple of things. So one, because I think we skipped it, was, and it's fine, was that before this whole thing started, he like presented him with that gift. Remember? He presented him with like an awkward painting thing. That's like super weird, right? Like you don't do that in a public forum like this. You don't like give your opponent a gift. It's very weird, and it came off as like trying to, appear to be the better person, the nicer guy, the better man,
the nice
so to
guy,
speak.
yeah.
Yeah, I thought that was really weird. And this opening about religion, I find incredibly problematic. It's like religious people telling on themselves, where he's confessing up front to being a super Jesus guy, but then he's basically saying, I don't bring any of that into my science. But it is the reason he's here questioning this science. And again, I don't know, I feel like this isn't on the audience, obviously, but I feel thoroughly unsatisfied with like the institutional response to this. Like, you should not be able to attack science as an academic and then for religious reasons, and then insist that your religion stay out of it when
Right.
People want to critique that. It's very weird, but it's this type of religious shielding that I just think really has to be addressed, and we haven't figured out how yet.
Yeah. I also want to say that the time of the gaps, I think that's what Aron was talking about. That's one of the things that that Tour is presenting here that is not, it's not real. It's not, there's no time of the gaps. He's denying deep time, and there are multiple fields of science where you can confirm deep time without even dabbling into a bio, right? It's evident in geology, astrophysics, everything.
Yeah.
Matter of data interpretation. That happens all the time in science. It's hard to interpret the scientific literature data. And as I do with my graduate students, we learn from each other. They from me and I from them. I plan to address Mr. Farina as I would a graduate student seeking to learn from him tonight. The textbook definition for the characteristics of life is responsiveness to the environment, growth and change, ability to reproduce, having metabolism and breathe, maintaining homeostasis and being made of cells and passing traits on to offspring. A valid hypothesis is one in which there is experimental evidence substantiating the proposed science. An invalid hypothesis is one in which there is no way to substantiate the proposed science. For example, my guest arrived to Houston from Los Angeles. A valid hypothesis would be that he flew to Houston on a commercial aircraft. That is a valid hypothesis because we can experimentally test the efficacy of commercial air travel. An invalid hypothesis would be that he drove here in a single molecule nanocar. Though that statement might be true, it is an invalid hypothesis since we have no experimental evidence for its validity. Nobody was present at life's origin, so we will never really know how life originated. But that's not what we're seeking to answer tonight. What we are seeking is an experimentally valid, verifiable hypothesis as to how life might have originated on an early Earth. We must see the origin of life.
So, how is that not a god of the gaps? I'm just not clear here. If he's saying that it's comparable to the to saying that a nano car doesn't exist, isn't his god the nano car? Just my thoughts.
I think he's. Well, the main thing I was going to point out is that he's wasting time, right? I always say when somebody needs to get you to concede to mundane aspects of reality or the scientific method or whatever it is, they're stalling. And so he's essentially wasting a lot of time by beating around the bush with things that don't really matter or make any sense. But this is the problem, like because he doesn't have to present an alternative, because he's not going to bring up his religious convictions, the way I look at it is he's effectively saying, I'm not going to do God of the Gaps, but all he's here to do is defend the gap. Like way more than just the mind the gap station at the mind the gap sign at the train station, right? Like he's literally here to defend the gaps, poke out holes, but then since he doesn't bring up his religious commitment, that's all he has to say that this isn't God of the Gaps, but it 100% is. And it's embarrassingly transparent to me.
Mm-hmm.
Life research data, not their unsubstantiated claims, even if those claims are written in their research papers. Mr. Farina, please show us their data. Show their data. My contention remains the same. One day I presume that we will have a valid hypothesis upon which life might have originated, but as of today, we do not. And with each passing year, the cellular target that we must disclose becomes harder to reach due to the increased realization of its minimal complexity. A study in the Journal of Pragmatics in 2021 considered the trend of hyperbole in scientific publications. The authors Hyland and Jiang wrote, quote, "We trace the use of 400 hyping words which seek to promote, embellish, or exaggerate aspects of research papers. Our results show a massive increase in these items, and increases are most marked in the hard sciences," unquote. So while overblown statements are occurring in all fields, origin of life takes the cake. My opponent's favorite
That's just
expert,
crazy
Professor...
talk.
Yeah, he's just claiming that, oh yeah, the scientists are saying this, but they're just hyping it. It's not real.
Yeah, and
What?
this is just more quote mining about scientific opinion. This is another apologetic technique people should be aware of, where. And notice the craziness. Of course, he asked Dave for studies that Dave produces, and then he acts like Dave is not producing. But beyond that, he keeps saying, show me the data, show me the data, show me the data. He produces no data. But check this out. Even when they do this quote mining thing, it's like having an evolution debate and citing what I say to you on YouTube versus what's in my research, right? My work is my research. When you cite a scientist, you should be citing their research on a topic. What apologists often do is cite the opinions of scientists, often out of topic, and also often literally outside of their research. Something they said in a book, something they said in a blog post, something they said in an opinion piece, something they said to a journalist, which makes it very easy to take what they said out of context because it wasn't actually in the context of relevant research to begin with. So it's quite pathetic that, of course, he's not presenting counter data, he's presenting counter opinion.
Yeah, it's cherry picking, cherry picking, quote mining, however you want to put it. Just people saying things out of context. You see it all the time, quoting some of the people he's going to talk about right here. So, yeah.
Professor Lee Cronin said in 2011 that he'd probably
literally says Lee Cronin as soon as I push play.
create life in his lab in 2 years. He did not. Another whom he often cites, Professor Jack Sostek, then at Harvard, now at the University of Chicago, said in 2014 that he'd create life in his lab in 3 to 5 years. He did not. Professor Dimitar Seselov from Harvard University said in 2014 that life would be created in the lab in 5 years. It did not happen, not even close. Prebiotically relevant means that we are restricted to materials, procedures, and conditions that might have been available on an early Earth. These are the 5 criteria. These are the 5 criteria that have to be experimentally addressed in a prebiotically relevant manner in order to have a valid hypothesis for life.
Let's go over these real quick. We got polypeptides equals protein and enzymes. Polynucleotides equals RNA. Polysaccharides for carbohydrates. The origin of specified information in the above polymers. Assembly of the above components into an integrated functional living system, namely a cell, not merely random mixed systems. All right, is this good?
No, I mean, I hate it. I hate this, right? Because to me, it's sort of like describing the essential classes of chemicals relevant to organic functions. And so it seems kind of harmless, right? But to say that all of these must have been present, in whatever conversations we're going to have about origins of life, it's problematically specific because it's such an arbitrary, to me, it's too arbitrarily high of a threshold to say all of these have to, it reinforces the notion that this is like a sudden thing. Like we're going to go from not having any of these things to boom, bam, all of a sudden we have all of these things just like we do right now, when not recognizing that, the sort of proto-systems along the way could have had much simpler versions of these, simpler combinations of these. And then he's almost telling him on himself with the last one, right? Because he's like, and you have to have everything together, assembled into a cell, just like it would be now. And that's the important part, because again, he wants to make sure. I hate to say this, but I'm gonna go there, Bree. It sounds like when we have these conversations about what is a woman, and the person never admits up front that they're not gonna accept the definition that includes trans. because they know all of the valid definitions we have don't work for them. And this feels like doing the same goddamn thing with the origins of life. I'm gonna define it in a way that excludes all of the evidence that I don't wanna count as evidence. And if you can't give me exactly that, then you haven't. And like, no, why didn't you just show up, say from the beginning, I reject biology. I will not accept any evidence that has an evolutionary mechanism or process involved. All right, your turn, Myth the Atheist Man. And let's just get to it, because that's what you're here to tell us. And so, yes, there's nothing like wrong with being like, yeah, we do have living systems that have all these things together. We're trying to explain where they all come from, but it's being a little bit arbitrarily weird about all of it. And then the last one, forcing them together. And again, to even make that like a simple point for people, we don't think life starts at a cell, right? There's like all of these proto processes mean it probably was not like a modern cell. And so we need to think outside of that. And so you're defining away probably essential parts of the process, almost so you can, again, make scientists defend a magical theory that no one is proposing to begin with. Yeah, sorry, that's what it reminds me of. That's what it feels like.
Yeah, no, you're good. Let's let it roll. I'm gonna speed him up just a little bit, though. I think. Just
Sure.
0.25.
Origin. We only have time for 5 tonight. Polypeptides, polynucleotides, polysaccharides, the origin of specified information, and the assembly of the above components into an integrated, functional, living system, namely a cell, not merely a random mixture of these. If my opponent is unable to supply all 5 criteria for life, then we're currently clueless on the origin of life. But since I don't think he'll be able to supply even one of the 5, it will show that we're not merely clueless, but utterly clueless. While some would like to portray me as one of the very few people that does not accept the hyped claims of origin of life researchers, I maintain that overconfident supporters of origin of life, like my opponent, are being abandoned by the origin of life research community itself. For example, Mr. Farina's own experts, whom he likes to cite, are now backing away from their own overblown claims. His often cited origin of life expert, Professor Jack Sostek, now says that aside from nature's construct of RNA, invoking of, quote, autocatalytic sets was never chemically realistic, unquote. Hence, the prebiotic relevance of autocatalytic sets crumbles. It's over, according to Professor Sostek. His often cited origin of life expert, Professor Donna Blackman, now acknowledges that there are no known prebiotically relevant autocatalytic
I got to throw
reactions
this in
that
here
greatly
because
enhance-
this is a refrain that you're going to hear from him. It's over. It's done. You're finished. That is the thought stopping. Again, it's the scientific malpractice. If you were really curious about this and concerned, you would say there are some questions that remain. Let's continue to do our research. But he's doing the work of a podcast, and he's defending the gap. So what he wants to say is you're wasting your time, you're clueless. You've had, how long has it been? You guys have had plenty enough time to figure this out. If you haven't solved this problem by now, move on to something more productive. You're never going to figure it out. He is trying to shut down an entire field. And so I just want people to pay attention to how many times he hits on phrases like that. Stop, you're done, shut it down, it's over. And that's what he really wants his audience to hear. He wants his audience to hear that this entire endeavor is a complete waste of time.
Yeah, it's so to say, even the people he's citing, they are going to say there are things we don't know. There's always going to be things we don't know and more to learn. He's using their quotes of them saying there's things that we don't know about how this happened to say, oh, we don't know anything about how this happened. It's ridiculous.
Yeah, and it's even what he's doing when he points to things and tries to say, Dave, well, nobody's done this or nobody's done that. Setting aside the fact that they have, and he makes that very clear, even if they hadn't, the scientific thing to do is, hey, we know that these things are possible. And so let's go explore and do experiments and see what's possible. But nope, he wants you to shut it down.
Yep.
Chirality of a substrate. The increases are minor, so no need to waste our time tonight on autocatalysis. His own origin of life expert, Professor Stephen Benner, an enormous figure in this field, now says that any group of randomly synthesized RNA molecules would afford, quote, 10 million or 100 million more molecules that catalyze the destruction of RNA, unquote, than catalyze the copying of themselves. And, quote, this will never give you life, unquote. Hence, the relevance of random RNA to make copies of itself bites the dust. It's over, according to Professor Benner himself.
It's over.
Origin of life expert Professor James Shapiro now writes, certain questions like the origins of the first living cells currently have no credible scientific answers, unquote. Evolution kingpin Professor Richard Dawkins now says, quote, we know little more than Darwin did about how it got started in the first place. We have no evidence bearing upon.
All right, hang on, here we go. Of course, now there's always theist versus atheist debate hidden in all this, right? But you hear everybody's got to defend Richard Dawkins. Also, this is a perfect example of scientific hyperbole. I would happily say, as an evolutionary biologist, we know little more about evolution today than we do in Darwin's time. Is that true? Fuck no, it's not true, but it's the way we get more funding and we get more money. We tell them we have no idea what we don't even know. Please send your tax money right on this way. But no, it's important because we want people to understand the more we learn, the more we have to learn. The more we answer, the more questions we uncover. And so, you know, we always use, you know, poetic language, like all we know now is just a drop in the bucket, right? You see what I'm saying? And he's trying to take that again to say, they're clueless, they don't understand anything, shut it all down. And we just can't fall for this. But this is another example how he's going to use rhetoric, again, mostly outside the context of actual research to infer things that are entirely not true about the field.
A man of science should not be using the language of science in the way that he's using it. He knows that, and Dave knows that, you and me know that, but half that audience does not know that. That's the sad part.
Absolutely. Absolutely.
Start of evolution on this planet, unquote. My opponent's favorite origin of life expert, Professor Lee Cronin, now writes and says on multiple occasions that, quote, origin of life research is a scam, unquote. And, quote, there are lots of layers to the scam, unquote. A scam means a dishonest scheme or a fraud. It's beautiful. It's as if Professor Lee Cronin has been scientifically born again. Mr. Farina, I respect your courage to be here tonight. It's too bad that origin of life researchers are not here themselves to defend their own data. Maybe they know the shallowness of their own research, while the less informed cannot assess the shallowness.
I should look up the source of that claim about Cronin, too. I'm not sure what the situation was on that. I bet Porpoise knows in the side chat, though. She's usually on top of that kind of stuff.
I'm looking forward to seeing the data with chemical specificity. That's what I will be asking of you, so I'm telling you up front. Not the overblown titles, not their outlandish claims, not the once upon a time over 1 million years stories, but the data to propose a valid hypothesis to the 5 criteria needed to build a living cell, thereby overcoming our cluelessness on origin of life. Thank you.
Mr. Farina, your opening statement, please.
Straight up. Hi, everyone. Thanks to Rice University.
Ready for a roast.
We are here because of James Tour. James is a chemist and also an apologist who lies about origin of life research on the internet. It's quite the double life. In order to understand why he does this, we turn to his faith. James has admitted publicly that he is a creationist. He believes that God created life due to religious scripture, which to him takes priority over scientific evidence. From his website, faith and belief go beyond scientific evidence for this scientist. Anyone who thinks this is not relevant to the discussion is delusional, as James is openly admitting that there's no science that could ever be done that will convince him that life was not directly created by God. He is ideologically bound to denying abiogenesis. He sometimes pretends to leave room for it, as he did just now, to seem open-minded, but he isn't. He's totally dogmatic. Therefore, his opinions on origin of life research are irrelevant, as he is approaching the field not as a scientist, but as a preacher. Of course, James pretends his rhetoric is scientific. He will bring up his H-index and list of publications. Less important is the fact that he has publicly admitted that his students do all the work and he slaps his name on the papers. More important is the fact that none of his research has anything to do with origin of life.
I was seeing a bit of S.J. Thomason's review of this, and she got all bent out of shape about that comment. But when it comes to research like that, is that saying his research students are doing the work, or what's the claim there?
All right, we'll go back to the slide.
Let's go look at yeah.
There's one. He
He is ideologically bound to denying abiogenesis.
Where was it? It's jumping back and forth between. Where is it?
Yeah, maybe he didn't have it up. Maybe he didn't have the quote up there.
There we go.
Long enough. There we go. Cannot compete with these men and women in my lab that are in their 20s. I've got 30 of them, 40 of them working in my labs. They bring to me discoveries. I didn't think of it. The student thought of it, but I still get the credit. It's amazing. My name's at the end of the thing with the little star, and I get the credit even though it was the student that did the work. See, that's, I mean, that's what he's got a problem with. So yeah, there is a way in which a lot of what we call principal investigators, you know, they do get a degree of credit normally as the last author for work that they supervise in their lab, but they're usually far too heavily involved in the process to say that they're getting credit for the student that does the work. And it's just, it's a problematic way, like it's just a fine line, right? It's a fine line between saying somebody's my advisor, of course they're going to get credit out of my work that comes out of my lab, but they would not then turn around and then brag about slapping their name on my stuff and getting credit for my work. Does that make sense? Like it's just
It's like bad form. Yeah.
Yeah. It's the way you go about describing that process, and also, you know, it's problematic too because it's all about context. If my advisor is describing work that again they supervised, they were instrumental in overseeing the project and then overseeing the manuscript, then obviously they're in a position to take accountability for that work and to defend it. This is problematic because it's probably in one of those contexts where he's in preacher mode. He's doing the self-deprecating, oh, it's not me that's really doing all this, it's all my brilliant students, right? But bro, you're a problem, right? So it's one thing to just say, oh, you're running a tight shop and you just hire the best people and aren't you so lucky that your name gets to be on it, versus you, you know, basically not being in a position to hold yourself accountable for the problems that are associated with your work, and then acting like even your legitimate stuff that you do is mostly you taking credit for other people's work.
All right.
More important is the fact that none of his research has anything to do with origin of life whatsoever and does not qualify him in this topic.
Oh, congratulations, Steph. I think Steph won a race or won something.
But also astronomy.
Oh, you won. Congratulations, Steph. She says you just got off the water. Excellent.
Yeah.
Excellent.
This is, I hate to tell her, sorry, Steph, this is what we expect from international level competitors, but glad you're where we find you to be most appropriate, in the winner's lane, yeah.
You rock, Steph.
And lots of other areas James is clueless about. When it comes to this topic, James is a YouTuber. His embarrassing commentary takes place exclusively on YouTube or in-person events for science-illiterate Christians who share his biases and delusions. James knows that science is done through the primary scientific literature, and he knows that his inability to publish anything on this topic makes him completely irrelevant. That's why he regularly lies and pretends that he is published in this area.
I've written 5 papers on origin of life. That's 5 more than most people have ever written on the topic. I've published 750 academic research papers, so I really know how to publish papers. And then people say, why don't you just write papers about it? I have. I've written 5 papers about it. People ignore them. Okay. He's claiming that he's written all these papers on origin of life.
Yeah.
And his papers are ignored because of conspiracy. These papers are actually blog posts in Inference Review, launched by Discovery Institute propagandist David Berlinski, which is not peer-reviewed and exists for the sole purpose of making pseudoscience appear more legitimate. Jim's clueless ramblings do not even remotely resemble primary scientific literature, but he lists them among his actual science on his website anyway. Of course, when facing this topic, James somehow forgets what primary literature is supposed to look like. That's how he initially got into hot water, slandering Nobel laureate Jack Szostak. James was complaining about the prestigious journal Nature and what Szostak allegedly published in it, and how it doesn't meet the typical standards of the journal. He called Jack a liar multiple times, to the delight of his clueless, cackling audience. In actuality, it wasn't primary literature at all, but a web article meant for lay people, and there were no lies or inaccuracies, as James continues to claim to this day. His profoundly unprofessional and defamatory behavior has only gotten worse as he now regularly attacks prominent researchers in this field or blatantly misquotes and misrepresents them. And that's why we're here, to highlight Jim's fraudulence. There is nothing to debate. The question as to whether we are clueless about the origin of life is idiotic. We aren't. Apologists like James train viewers to regurgitate the ridiculous lie that there has been no progress since the Miller-Urey experiment of the 1950s. In reality, we have multiple viable prebiotic synthetic pathways to all the relevant biomolecules and their polymers. And systems chemistry is showing us how sets of these molecules can have evolved over millions of years to produce the first protocell, which we will discuss later. James knows essentially nothing about any of it, but pretends to for his viewers who take him on blind faith, something they are quite comfortable doing. So we will get to James fumbling the science in a moment, but first it is important to establish that James is a brazen liar and charlatan in ways that everyone can understand without knowing anything about science. For example...
That's just guns blazing right there.
Yeah. I'm trying to, not be too. I know I talk too much, but
no, you're fine. I need you to be more verbose.
It's really important that I really just want to say I value this approach. I really do. I know I saw a couple of responses where people were going back and forth about, is this an ad hominem attack? And my response is no, and who cares? and I say no because I really do think credibility matters. And when someone is such an egregious lack of credibility, especially when it explains their motivation for the position that they're taking, I think it's incredibly relevant. And you have to think about how these debates are structured. There's very limited time, there's very limited appeal, and I think it's more important that the audience leave at least with Dave's honest take on what a charlatan James Tour is than they leave with a refresher on advanced biochemistry. And the reason I say who cares is because at the end of the day, I do think there's such thing as like right and wrong. And I think that what Dave is trying to do in this situation, to me, is the right thing. And I feel like part of the meta culture around all these debates and conversations is we get stuck in debate mode, right? And so we're having these critiques, right? And then we have these thought-topping moments like, well, you did this fallacy, or so-and-so did that fallacy. And it's like, you know what? I don't really care. Even if it was a fallacy, like, are fallacies really that important? Like, I don't know. To me, they're just not, right? So I don't think it was, but even if it was, I'd be like, well, I guess he just had to risk doing a fallacy to call this guy's bluff, and I'm glad he took that risk. And I'm sure maybe other people will have, because I'm gonna watch his conversation with Aron about it and stuff like that. And so
yeah,
I'm hoping to hear more about constructive criticism, and I would love to hear constructive criticism like from Dave, like if he's heard anything that makes him reevaluate his position. But I just want to say I don't blame him for taking this tack, and I think he did it quite effectively. So, can't win them all.
And Dr. Dinos gives us another $2 super chat. In Mark's review, we had a lot of notes for Dave. I have notes for Dave too. I was hoping him and Aron would be able to stick around a little bit longer, but we had to keep them for about an hour, which was as much as I could hope for on this little channel for them to show up and hang out with us for just a little bit. At least Dr. Bundy is sticking around while we go into this debate. I don't know how far we're going to get into it. I'll probably just get a little bit past the opening statements, and we may do a part 2 or something at some point.
No worries. It's up to you, Bree.
My position on Dave's opening statement, guns a-blazing. He did come out guns a-blazing, and I do think that for the live audience who did not have the groundwork of the interactions these two men have had leading up to this, Dave may have come across as more of an asshole in the situation. But if you'd seen the back and forth conversations that these men have had over videos on YouTube and the things that they said to each other via those videos, you might think the animosity is not so one-sided. obviously James is in his alma mater, if you will, so he's going to be a little bit more, or I guess, is that his alma mater? I think it's just where he works.
No, his home institution, yeah, just where he works, yeah.
Yeah.
His place of employment, I guess. Yeah.
I'll quit rambling and get on with the debate.
Part of Jim's script is to complain about the primordial soup model. He describes this as lightning striking some water and molecules form a slithering creature that crawls out. This is the dumbest straw man in history. Yet he insists that all these textbooks say precisely this, and it is taught to undergraduates as well as graduate students. In actuality, the textbooks look like this. They contain summaries of much of the research we will discuss momentarily: syntheses of biomolecules, ribozymes, autocatalysis, and other complex concepts. So he's just lying. He's trying to make science he doesn't like seem infantile and stupid. Another way he downplays the validity of the field is to pretend that almost no one is working in it. He claims it's a boutique field with no more than a dozen teams examining the problem. That's a lie. There are thousands of scientists working on this all over the world. He needs to lie about
right
this because
here.
it's much more difficult to claim that thousands of scientists are all either corrupt or stupid, while only James knows the truth. A dozen is much easier to swallow, so he lies. He also pretends to be well-read in the subject. He isn't. He has admitted that he's read less than 5% of the literature on the topic, although in reality, over 3 million papers have been published since 2016, so he's read maybe 0.1% of the literature. More importantly, for the few papers he has read, the diligence he projects is a facade. As to anyone knowledgeable, he reveals a level of incompetence that is shocking for someone of his stature. Take, for example, this study by Stephen Benner, a researcher James regularly slanders. Here, Benner was showing nucleotide polymerization over basaltic glass to form RNA. James notes that Benner washes the glass thoroughly with hydrogen peroxide and ultra-pure water, and then throws his hands in the air about how this makes the study not prebiotically relevant, because he is washing away trace magnesium that would impede nucleotide polymerization on the early Earth. In his profound ignorance, James neglects to realize that basaltic rock is specifically rich in magnesium, information that anyone who had taken Geology 101 would know. Furthermore, he wonders where, oh where, could one find hydrogen peroxide and ultra-pure water on the early Earth, as though its use makes the study not prebiotically relevant. In reality, these are used to destroy biological material like bacteria that would contaminate the results. So, in fact, the washes are done specifically to make the experiment prebiotically relevant. This example is crucial because James will focus much of his empty criticism on claiming that research is not sufficiently prebiotic. But remember this example where James was so clueless.
So understand that he just said sterilizing the sterilizing for catalase was not making a good example of a prebiotic environment. What environment does he think that the prebiotic world was? I don't know.
Again, he thinks you should not have used, clean glassware, and then, of course, argue that the results are invalid due to contamination. Which is what most people argue. I mean, but this is exposing someone, and it takes time and work to do this. And I want to say before that, I actually think Dave does address his arguments, right? And this is part of it, is just showing how he's missing everything. He's missing everything. And this is, look, I know it's painful for some people to watch, but you have to remember that people like Dr. Tor present themselves as scientific authorities who people then use to reinforce their religious views. And it's important that these people realize the people they're listening to are con artists. And he's just exposing them. There will be blood.
Yeah. You're gonna stand up on the stage and let him do it too. He's gonna stand here and let him do it.
That he does not even understand what the researchers are doing and why. This is his primary tactic. He skims the supplemental section of a paper, invents a technical flaw out of thin air, and pretends it negates the results of the paper, and by extension, origin of life research in general. But it gets much worse. James regularly botches concepts not just in geology, but also in his own field. For an example, we return to Benner's research where he synthesized ribose in prebiotically relevant fashion. James doesn't like it one bit, and when confronted with a 13C-NMR spectrum demonstrating the presence of ribose, he not only pretends the data is invalid, but he goes to town with meme after meme, cartoon after cartoon, childishly mocking Benner for his garbage data. Here's his laughing Spanish guy meme where the whole crowd laughs in unison at the idiot Benner who thinks he got ribose when it's actually a mess of a billion compounds. But the joke joke is on James, as his pathetic commentary reveals that he can't even read a 13C NMR spectrum, something he should have learned as an undergrad. James compares the spectrum to that of pure ribose when the sample is ribose borate, a different compound, with broad peaks due to rapidly interconverting forms. The billions of compounds are actually just noise, as the vertical axis is expanded to highlight the wider peaks. This abject failure has been confirmed by every chemist I've corresponded with, from Benner himself to J. William Suggs, Professor Emeritus of Chemistry at Brown University, and many others. The idea that James can't do something that an undergrad could do is astounding, and whether his brain ceases to function when examining this research, or he is deliberately lying to a gullible audience with no clue what he's talking about, his credibility is reduced to zero with this example alone. So that's a brief summary of James' tour. He's a toxic individual and pathological liar who actively promotes science denial and slanders diligent researchers. Or in my case, he scours the internet for clips of me in music videos to commit character assassinations. Or unleashes a barrage of insults about how Dave doesn't know chemistry, even though most of his students use my organic chemistry tutorials to get through his unbearable course.
I'm going to say that me and you and Dave need to start a science band.
I'm with it. I'm with it. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, I'm on drums.
Yeah, I
Count
think
on
Dave plays guitar, I think. I can play bass or guitar or anything else, really. So, yeah, let's do it.
He baselessly shouts hype when his own research is full of hype. He whines about being accused of believing in the God of the gaps when he objectively does. He publicly calls for the halting of an entire field of science he doesn't understand just to shelter his fragile, archaic faith. But today, finally, with no desk to hide behind, every tactic will be elucidated in real time, and he will be made accountable for his lies for everyone to see. I hope you'll enjoy it as much as I will.
We now turn to Dr. Tour, who will ask a question.
One of the things that we have to make in order to have life are polypeptides.
Here we go.
We take amino acids, and these amino acids have to couple.
Is that
And when they
lysine?
couple, it will form a dipeptide.
Well, let's go and get it all written out, and I want you, and then you're going to break it down for our lay people, okay?
It does.
All right, let's get a look at it.
This dipeptide is one of thousands and thousands.
All right, so I think we got a good idea what's here. I don't know what's behind his head, but can you tell us what we're looking at here, Jay?
No.
No? Okay.
I mean, I'm not a like organic chemistry special, but what I can tell you is that these are just representations of how we get organic molecules. And the problem that I have with what he's doing here is he's explaining the pathways. Like it's it would be like me showing you humans on the right, showing you a bunch of pre-human ancestors on the left, and then acting as though, because I can't show you a link between them, we don't know that links between them exist. I mean, to me, he's just lying on chemistry, right? And that's
this is very similar to the gaps in the gaps in the fossil record or whatever that they talk about on the creationist corners of things.
Yes, he's just demanding that we have an experiment that shows how we get from what's on the left to what's on the right in a particular way, which we have, and this is kind of the thing that I was kind of trying to tell you before we started, which is it's kind of difficult to explain, but the best way to explain it is you have to think about an actual science education, right? We don't create scientists in a vacuum. And so unless this is your particular area of research, meaning these are the type of experiments you do for your dissertation work or in your lab, you're not going to be very familiar with what he's saying. And there's a very good reason for that. You don't base what you teach people on apologists, right? So that is where they get off, right? So again, think about what he's done. He's taken Dave's material, he's gone through specifically to find an example that is a gap in the research, right? And now he's presenting that gap in the research as though it undermines the entire field. Well, first of all, it doesn't, right? So why would you be prepared for this, right? Because it's not an issue. Right? If something's already been done in the field, it's already been demonstrated, it's probably not an active area of research. So this is kind of where I see a big problem. I see it as, to be honest, scientists are not adequately prepared to deal with apologists, right? It's like if you sit down most evolutionary biologists and they listen to a Sal Cordova and you look for them to explain zinc fingers to you. You're gonna be like, I don't know anything about zinc fingers, because they're not actually relevant issue to evolution, right? So it's only, you have to sort of have an education in apologetics so that you take on a very particular education in science. But you have to remember that science, you're only learning to refute apologetics. It's not actually what science are talking. So most people think, oh, if you just pull an organic chemistry up, they'll be able to explain. They'll explain the molecules in the pathway, but why that's an issue for origins of life research, they won't be able to explain to you because it isn't.
Gotcha. Yeah. And I think Aron and Dave, when they were talking earlier, discussed this exact thing he did here. And explained why there was no sense in Dave taking the chalk and trying to follow through with James's request here, because there are factors that can't be represented on a chalkboard with lines.
That I'll definitely help people. We can break
yeah,
down people.
And yeah, if there's like different factors, including the chronology of the whole thing, that's going to come into play that just can't be represented on a chalkboard like that.
Thousands and thousands that would have to form. If you were going to make a polypeptide, you'd need at least 100 of these for a very small polypeptide. Mr. Farina, show me the prebiotic chemistry that would do this coupling. Be my guest.
Okay. Yeah, I don't need the board. So this was my second prompt, so I guess we'll circle back to this. But yeah, you keep going, show me the references in your in your content. But so you're missing a mountain of research, literally a mountain of research that demonstrates this. So here's one: condensation of amino acids to form peptides in aqueous solution. So we've got sulfur 4 oxidative model, carbonyl sulfide mediated prebiotic formation of peptides. There's another one.
That does not do it, and the two you showed do not do it. This is called asparagine. DK. They do not do it with these.
Okay, so what is Lehman's a fraud? Gadiri's a fraud? Are you calling them a fraud? They published a paper, carbonyl sulfide mediated prebiotic.
All right, so there was
peptides.
the first shifting of the goalpost, right? He was supposed to be drawing a trivial example of the board of a general class of interactions making these peptides. Dave is like, oh, I already knew you were going to go here. I've got all types of stuff prepared for peptides. Now he's going to go to, no, you're not showing me specifically what I'm looking for. And then Dave's going to go, no, actually, here's some research where they produce all of that, including what you're showing. And then Tor's just going to continuously shift the conditions that he's asking for. And that's why they were saying there's nothing he could have drawn on the board that would have helped. And this is also what I mean about, like, what scientific education really looks like. You remember, you don't become a scientist to refute and undermine science. So when if I'm learning this as a biologist, I'm learning, okay, well, let's just say I'm interested in origins of life. What do we know so far about this? You're going to show us these papers that Dave is citing. You're like, look at all this work we've done, right? And so a lot of this gets filed for most students under solved problems, right? Like we already have, relevant prebiotic models that someone's already shown how we get these chemical synthesis. nobody's about to write their dissertation on this because that research is already done, and he's showing you it. And that's the problem too, is there's a ton of this stuff, right? So it's really hard because all James Tour is just going to do is keep shouting, no, 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 Dave. And Dave is somehow literally prepared for everywhere he's going to. I mean, he had to put so much work into preparing for this debate. That's all I'm trying to say. But yeah, let's go.
Yeah.
Show me the example in there. I studied this. I looked over every paper you put up.
You have never studied anything in this area. Are you kidding me? All you do is go, show me the papers, and then I show you papers. Here, let's see if I can find that one exactly.
Yeah, show me the one exactly that does this in a prebiotic fashion. Show me. It's not there. Okay. I'm asking you to come up and show me the chemistry.
James, I don't need to write on the board. I brought actual papers. This is actually...
You can see the chemistry in the papers, too, that he just showed.
Okay, but this is just another really problematic thing to do. First off, he's setting an unreasonable expectation for a debate, right? Number one, debates are not really supposed to be this back and forth of I'll show you mine, you show me yours. Because what if a person doesn't have the research? What if Dave couldn't produce the papers? Does that mean this research never happened? Does that mean James Tour is right? Does that mean just because Dave can't produce some specific paper that shows a specific synthesis under very specific conditions that, oh, we should throw abiogenesis out the window because Professor Dave Explains is not aware of research that does this. And then again, like I said, over and over again, even if that research didn't exist, we would just be pretending that we're in a phase before it had been done. Why does he think that he gets to shut down an entire field because his favorite pet interaction is yet to be demonstrated? It's just fucking ridiculous.
Well, it's odd that Dave brought so many citations. Like you saw his slides, they all had citations at the bottom of them to say, look at this research for this information, that research. They even pulled up slices of the papers themselves up on the screen with highlights of the sections that he's referring to. Whereas Tour is just writing polypeptide formulas that don't exist on the board and claiming that if Dave can't show that they do exist, that ABIOS should just be kicked out the oh wow, hey Myth Vision podcast.
Hey Derek.
Shout out to my fam. Here is some love for being amazing human beings. You missed it. We had Aron and Professor Dave in here earlier, Derek, but thank you so much for dropping in. You can scroll back a ways and see what Dave had to say. I think we got the first interview after the debate. We were the post-fight interview, so to speak, right, Jay?
Yes, exactly. Absolutely. But yeah, this is just more of just like I was telling Aron. It's just like what Sal Cardova did. It's find some particular grad level issue that's way over the head of the audience and won't even be picked up on by. It's I gotta admit, the same way it's kind of an effective debate tactic if no one's calling it out. It's effective on the audience too, because it's easy to make people who are scientifically literate seem like they don't know what they're talking about just because they can't tear apart or meet a specific bar that you set. It's it really works wonders with an audience that's totally scientifically illiterate.
Yeah.
Show me the paper. Show me in that paper this example. This is called.
This is the one you wanted.
Aspartic acid.
James.
This is called lysine.
James, look. This is the Gadiri paper. Here's the scheme. You want to go through that?
But
he's got it right there. The scheme that he's talking about on the paper. He's asking for the formulas. There they are.
Aqueous, room temperature. You get oligopeptides.
But I think this is part of a lot of people's frustration because it's why I imagine a lot of people say you shouldn't do these debates, right? Because it's in order for Dave to counter James Tour's claims, he has to himself be prepared with all of these papers, all of these citations, and then he also doesn't have time to get into or educate the audience about those. So effectively, he's saying, well, nobody would believe James Tor unless you came in here committed to do so. And unless you came in here committed to, believe me, you'll just have to accept that these papers I'm flashing up in front of you refute what he's saying. Now, that is the effective way to handle this, but I hope people can pick up on why this is so ineffective and why the whole debate plays right into their hands, because you have to go to just an equally inaccessible place to get them, and then the audience is right back to where they started, just picking whose presentation they wanted to buy into.
All right.
But not with this, because what happens is this would participate, this would participate.
Oh, you want to do the side chain thing. Okay, well, we got research for that, too.
Of course, I'm speaking to the side chain. This is not
There you
glycine.
go.
That's not prebiotically relevant. That has nothing to do with prebiotic.
Okay, how about this one?
That sulfur compound was made separately in dichloromethane using HOBT, which is a coupling agent designed by human beings for solid phase synthesis. That's how they made
Are you saying sulfur is not available prebiotically? It doesn't matter what solvent they use.
No, HOBT was the compound, that SH compound that you just showed was made in a separate reaction. That was in a separate reaction, and he describes that.
Okay.
I can show you in the paper.
Thank you. If you don't like that one, how about this Pounder one? Pounder, Jack's reduced selective peptide formation.
All right. Prebiotic catalytic peptide ligation yields proteinogenic peptides by intramolecular amide catalyst hydrolysis facilitating regioselective lysine ligation in neutral water. That's a mouthful. Good grief.
Yeah, although I do recognize the name Daniel Whitaker. I think they might be somebody out in this community. Paging Daniel Whitaker. Oh man, but look, this is a great example. Gang, you have to be really into it, and there's a real opportunity here for someone who is really what I would call, with all due respect, a biochemistry nerd, right? Because getting into these particular weeds is very interesting. But just think about how many graduate level vocabulary words are in that title, right? And so it reminds me of how when we're talking about Republican policies that don't make any sense and people grow, the cruelty is the point, right? When we're dealing with apologetics in pseudoscience, confusion is the point. You not getting it is the point. It going over your head and going, well, I can't refute them because he used way too many words. That's the point. And so the way to counter it, again, if you're an uber nerd, go ahead and jump into the weeds, because you're going to realize they're full of crap, and then you're going to have the knowledge and expertise to break that down, like why they're full of crap. You're going to explain that to people, which me and Bree just put a link to a great talk in the description. That's how YouTubers get down. But for other people, it's much more important to be able to take a step back, recognize the tactics the person is using, recognizing how disingenuous they're being, and then using that to realize, oh, I'm not going to go down their little rabbit trail, because that's the waste of time that they want me to engage in, and I'm not going to fall for that.
Yeah. Red herring, I think, is the proper terminology.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Show me your scientific before you show me your science.
Yeah, the formula he was demanding is a red herring in and of itself. It doesn't have to be that formula. There's a 1,000 ways or 1,000 formulations that could have led to the first biotic organisms, but we just
and again, I've gotten the assignment. It's literally how it is. You draw the assignment of teaching cells and molecules to students. And in no part of your training for that teaching and no part of what you're teaching your students are you explaining to them, well, yeah, here's all the research of the experiments that have tested the prebiotic conditions of the synthesis of polypeptide. Like, no, it's a totally unrealistic. This is like debating Yu-Gi-Oh cards with people. You know, you just got to be into it.
Yeah. Yeah, and I'm glad that's why I invited you here. I know you're a chemistry nerd.
Oh yeah, I'm cut through all this BS and
we can speak. I can speak a little bit of chemistry, but I just pharmaceutical chemistry. We look for non-organic compounds for the most part.
Yes.
An acylated amino nitrile.
Yeah,
go ahead.
No, it's fine. You're good. You're good.
Wait, hold on. I got the scheme here.
It's not in there. You're going to look and look. It's not in there. I studied every one of your papers. Towner doesn't even use amino acids. He uses an amino
nitrile. That's a totally different paper.
Amino acid.
James, that's not the same paper. You're talking about a different paper.
There is no coupling.
Look, he got coupling with lysine, regioselective lysine ligation, the most selective peptide ligation that tolerates all proteinogenic side chains.
But
he did this
does not
with
do
all side
an
chains.
amino acid coupling. He's got.
What are you talking about? Prebiotic catalytic peptide ligation.
There's no amino acids there.
Yes, it's amino acids.
Okay, so go to the equation of that. Go to the equation of that.
I don't have that one, but you're just lying. You're also shifting the goalposts, though. Because by the way, you pretend that there are no papers that show any peptide formation in water. I just showed you a ton. You're shifting goalposts by complaining about the side chains.
How am I shifting the goalposts? These are the ones you've got to do. If you can't do it with these active side chains. You cannot.
But he did.
Towner didn't do it with the active side chains. He used an amino nitrile.
Okay,
there are no amino acids.
No, James, you're talking about a completely different paper. Peptide ligation by chemoselective amino nitrile coupling in water.
That's an amino nitrile.
See, this all right here is over my head. I mean, I just have to trust that Dave's correct and James is incorrect here. I mean, it is like you were saying, what the refuge in confusion. Me as someone who's basically lay in origins of life research, I have to depend on the fact that Dave is presenting research that says that this is what we're finding out, and then James is saying that that's all hype, and I have to trust that the people doing the actual research in the field are honest honest. What's the word I'm looking for? Honest actors, I guess, is the way I want to say it, and that Dr. Tour has ulterior motives. And then you look into, say, so what kind of ulterior motives would he have? And then you look into it and you say, okay, he's a young Earth creationist, of course. All the pieces fall in place for me. But for the people in the audience who don't know James or that would have had the this is why, what I'm getting at is this is why Dave's introduction to James as a preacher and not as a scientist for this audience was important. That's where he's got a lot of criticism for in his opening statement. It was important at this point right here to understand who you should trust, the preacher or the scientist, when James is the preacher in this situation.
Yeah, and he did a little bit of both, right? And like he tried to address the arguments and he tried to address the science. Again, very limited time to do so, especially given that he gave up so much time to address James's character problems. But yeah, that's the nature of the beast. And again, I think it would have, from my perspective, I don't think he would have helped himself to dig deeper into the science given this time format. I know that people complain that I did the same thing with Kent Hovind. So this I guess I'm developing a bit of a reputation for being the scientist who says don't get too lost in the science. But it's just, you don't have time in these formats. And since you are engaging with a disingenuous actor, it's more important to point that out because you need people to understand that this isn't how scientific discourse is done in the first place. Yeah.
Right, exactly. Him, and that's why I see a lot of the criticisms when I'm like looking on Twitter and stuff, people coming at Dave about the way this debate was handled. He had to build an understanding with the audience of the debate that, because the debate really is whether James Tour is right about the origin of life researchers being clueless or not. That's the debate. And Dave's bringing paper saying, these are the origin of life researchers. They're not clueless. Here's their research. And James saying, no, they're clueless. So he had to build that image. He had to say, look, this is the guy that's saying they're clueless. This is the other stuff he said. Right?
Yeah. And, you know, because I actually, you know, Bree, as far as how to manage this, I'm down with whatever you want. If you want to do a series of these or however, I'm just here. I love doing this with you. But however, I don't care. You don't even tell me. But I was just gonna say, this reminds me of cancel culture, right? And here's how. What I hear with a lot of these criticism is, let's say people who are ostensibly, let's say they're atheists and they're science and they're critical thinkers and they're mostly on our side, right? But what happens is, in subtle ways, we let the other side dictate the conversation, if only because we don't want to hear certain critiques on our side. So we'll hear this debate, and then we'll see a bunch of, you know, James Tor apologists or sycophants going, well, he personally attacked him, and that was ad hominem, and that was wrong, and da-da-da-da-da. And so a lot of us sort of out of good faith, we're sort of going, well, I really just, oh man, I wish he didn't do that so I didn't have to hear this, right? And so then we start saying that, well, he did kind of go a little bit far in attack. Well, he did come at it pretty hard. Maybe it was a little bit of an ad hominem. And I'm like, no, y'all, this is just like when somebody is way out of whack, we shut that shit down, they face the backlash, and they start crying cancel culture. It's the same thing. He got his ass whooped, he got exposed for the liar he is. Now let's not carry water for the other side by trying to say, well, philosophically speaking, I mean, I'm like, bro, I ain't even trying to hear that. Shut that down. Shut that down. He was a fraud. He got his card pulled. Period. End of story. Shut all that ad hominem philosophy nonsense down.
Absolutely. Yeah, let's see here.
That is a different paper.
It's not amino acid.
I know.
By the way, I was thinking probably just maybe another half an hour, go till 10
Sure, sure.
Yeah.
Paper. He takes amino acid. This is just a different. He's not going through peptide bond formation. It's a different, right? So you have peptides. You have amino acids condensing. That's peptide formation. He's figuring out a different synthetic pathway that doesn't do coupling, but it doesn't matter. There's a million of these, right? Condensation by wet-dry cycling.
Nobody has done this. I'm asking you, Spurford.
I remember that paper coming out, the wet and dry cycling. I was I learned about that. Shout out to Answers in Atheism. Go subscribe. I don't know if Speed and Scott are still with us. They're both getting up there in years and tend to turn in early. But yeah, I first learned about that research paper on that channel. You know them, right, Jay? Answers in Atheism.
Oh, absolutely. Yeah, definitely. Go subscribe to Mike, man. That's my guy.
Because half of the amino acids have active side chains. And these guys play this game of not including these ones that have carboxylic acids, not including the ones that have amines.
This is an
You can't do this coupling.
acylated aminonitrile plus unprotected amino acid, hydrolyzed pH 7 to form a dipeptide.
Which amino acid? Hydroxylated ones. Never carboxylated, never deaminated.
Did you see his face?
Proteinogenic side chains. All
from aminonitrile.
Right.
He was like, what did you just say? Yeah.
Okay, this is really instructive though, because garbage in, garbage out, not hard to muster, not hard to disprove. When these guys are doing this thing where they do this cursory reading of the abstract or the cursory reading of the introduction, or they find some weirdo detail in the supplement, ironically, it sometimes allows you to counter it with just a glance at the title or just a mention from the abstract. In other words, they've only gone to the surface, so you only really kind of have to go to the surface, because they're gonna violently misrepresent what the authors actually said, right? So then you could just, read a sentence or two further where they make their actual conclusion, and you can cite that. But yeah, ultimately, it's gonna be up to the audience to take their to decide how deep they want to go with the details. And I just want to say this quickly, like, origin of life means a lot of things to me. And I do want people who want kind of what I would consider good video summarized stuff, check out the link we put in the description. It's like a 25-minute talk, and I think...
Oh, shoot, I didn't even add that. I'm sorry.
No worries, you could drop it in the chat or something.
Yeah.
But it's a really good kind of presentation that'll give you the lay of the land on these issues. But here's a couple things to keep in mind. Origins of life actually means a lot of things. In some narrow sense, it's the quest to understand the origins of, you know, our tree of life on this particular planet, from, say, prebiotic conditions through whatever we may come to understand about our last universal common ancestor. But in a way, it's about, you know, early life, early living systems. You know, they don't all have to be directly tied to our tree of life. It's also about what are the conditions and processes governing transitions from abiotic chemistry to biotic chemistry, and that may take place, right, on other planets, right, or other epochs. So there's there's astro questions involved, and like my work with evolutionary theory, a lot of it's applied. Like a lot of it is we want to know, for instance, can we use this transition? We know biotic systems are good at solving certain problems, and abiotic systems are good substrates for solving certain problems. Is there things we
phosphine, the organic compound found on Venus too recently? So
yeah, so that's an example of sort of the, you know, the questions about other living systems, other planets and things like that. But there's also applied, there may be applications, right? There may be functional reasons to understand, you know, for instance, just like there may be some useful byproduct or commercially viable or medically viable substance that we generate by going from some sort of you know, abiotic chemistry to biotic chemistry, right? Like, in other words, there's a lot of reasons people investigate these type of questions. Why is that important? Because it really broadens what origins of life research means. And so then it's all too easy for apologists to come along and nitpick at research and point out that it doesn't answer questions that if you actually sat down with the researchers, they tell you they never intended to answer to begin with, right? And so I think if apologists are going to keep bringing this up, I just think it's important that people realize that we're talking about a very broad topic, and apologists are talking about something artificially and superficially narrow.
Yes, and I also want to point out what Joel Hadaway said in the live chat. James is assuming that all 20 amino acids were used in the first replicating cell. Yes, it's an irreducible complexity argument on the chemistry level is basically what it comes down to. Thank you, Joel, and I appreciate your brain in the side chat there, friend.
Yeah, thanks, Joel. Appreciate it. Good to see you, Joel, also, by the way. Joel's that's one of my good buddies.
Yeah.
I'm telling you, he did this with lysine. Okay, so the side chain thing is not a problem. So forget the fact that you can't handle that. Right, that peptide formation in water happens and has been demonstrated by about a dozen of these papers that I've shown you.
Only with an activator, as you said in your second series.
Yeah, chemical activator. Prebiotically plausible chemical activator.
Your first series, you never said this. With an activator, you're not coupling for your amino acids.
Okay,
yes,
we've reached the end.
Carbonyl
sulfide. End of the 5 minutes. Yeah. So I just have one quick comment going back to the NMR, and that is when organic chemists run NMRs, they typically don't run them with boric acid present. If you're going to run a C13 NMR of ribose, you want the ribose to be as pure as it can possibly be. But
you're doing chemistry on borate minerals. That's why it was ribose borate.
So now it's your turn to ask.
Sounds good. Yeah, we'll get back to the peptides in a second because that was my second prompt. But let me.
I didn't understand that interjection from the moderator. Did you?
1 minute. Okay.
I was typing a message. Go back. The moderator bothered the fuck out of me. Let me hear what he said.
Yeah, let me go back and roll back through it.
How far back
was it? It was just a little ways back.
Yeah, I just hit the arrow keys. They go back 10 seconds at a time, I think, or 5. Go ahead. Yeah, it should be good.
Okay. We'll continue looking at research in a moment, but first I can't resist confronting James about some of these lies he's been telling, so let's list a few and get some answers. So first, the textbook thing. Primordial super...
Yeah,
James
hold on.
about
I just want to.
prompt, but
C present.
Oh, here we go.
There we go.
When
Yeah.
organic chemists run NMRs, they typically don't run them with boric acid present. If you're going to run a C13 NMR of ribose, you want the ribose to be as pure as it can possibly be. But
he was doing chemistry on borate minerals. That's why it was ribose borate.
So now it's your turn to
Sounds
ask,
good. Yeah, we'll
Dr.
get back to the
Kirk.
peptides in a second because that was my second prompt.
Yeah,
But,
so
Okay.
he was just trying to clarify about a methodology typically used, and then Dave was clarifying the nature of the actual experiments that they were talking about. Overall, this moderator was running interference, and for those in the audience, something that you may be familiar with is like when Donnie from Standing for Truth hosts these Kent Hovind debates, and you've come to realize they're not exactly a neutral moderator, and that was very much what this moderator was like, sort of playing the middle, but not really being a neutral participant.
let me. 1 minute. Okay. We'll continue looking at research in a moment, but first I can't resist confronting James about some of these lies he's been telling, so let's list a few and get some answers. So first, the textbook thing. Primordial soup model is lightning and then a slithering creature crawls out, and that's what all these college-level textbooks say. Again, no, they don't. He made that up, like a liar. Next, this boutique field of a dozen researchers thing. Of the millions of papers that comprise this field, I went through a handful of the ones I've read and made this list. There are thousands more. Pretty dumb lie, huh? And let's add one more. When I had some scientists on my content to help expose James as a fraud, one of them was a friend of mine, organic chemist Bruce Lipschitz, who explained how James was objectively wrong about peptides being unable to form in water, as I just showed you, which I'll prove with about a dozen papers, or I did, and will continue to do so. This hurt James so badly that he spun a ridiculous lie about how I took an unrelated clip of Bruce and stuck it in my content behind his back. This was so idiotic that I had to get Bruce to make another statement specifying that I requested the clip from him and that I had permission to use it, though James did not have permission to share their email exchange. In his emails with James, Bruce explicitly states that he was responding to the claims James had made. There it is in red. But his viewers can't read, so they just ate up the fabricated story. Now, again, remember, I'm demonstrating conclusively that James is a pathological liar. This is important because James also lies about...
That's what I was saying earlier. That's why it was important to build this, to make sure that they build this character of the person who he's been engaging with publicly, all on public record, all on YouTube, back and forth between these two gentlemen, of James lying and Dave exposing it, and James lying and Dave exposing it. There's a long history of that, so you got to understand that Dave's coming into this already having bitter back and forth with this person where he keeps lying and none of his audience is holding him accountable. So you can see a level of frustration.
And what I find to be critical about this is I'm far more concerned about Christians than I am about James Tor. And my frustration with the average believer is that they have not yet come to the realization that their quote-unquote sincere belief, if that's what we're going to take it as in good faith, relies on bad faith actors, right? They may be a good faith actor, but they are depending on bad faith actors. And typically, a lot of times they have particular heroes, be it Hovind or maybe it's James Tor or whatever apologist or preacher it is. And so it is often very important to undermine that authority figure's credibility with them to actually get them to open their mind up. So you got to kind of undermine the authority of a figure when you're dealing with people who authority comes first, right? And even their position here. James Tor is an expert in this field to them and an authority on these topics. Professor Dave is not. And the main thing Professor Dave wants people to walk away with is realizing, no, that's not actually the case, right? That's more important to him than the actual trivial, I shouldn't say trivial science, but, you know, readily available research that actually demonstrates that James Tor is wrong scientifically.
Yeah, I just want to say also that when this isn't really Dave versus James here, it's Dave with all of these people versus James, and that's where maybe some of the nuance is getting missed. That's why Dave's bringing these papers up. All of these researchers are studying and coming up with formulas for origin of life research. These are just, and he says these are just a few randoms from papers he's read. We could pull up, you type in origin of life, ray biogenesis into Google Scholar and see how much has been written on it in the last 5 years. It's thousands.
This is a gross undersampling, and again, it's only people who mention these topics usually very explicitly in their work. You know, a lot of people don't necessarily.
Yeah.
Important, because James also lies about science that goes over most people's heads. So by proving to you what a liar he is, you are now primed to realize how he is lying about all the complex details of origin of life research as well. This way you won't just nod your head and assume James must be right. So let's begin. Let's begin with the textbook thing. Why would you tell this dumb lie, James? Why would you tell this lie?
You think you've been taught things that aren't. We'll think about molecules in a bottle. Okay, so there is a primordial soup model, and there is no understanding of what's happening in this primordial soup, and you talk to people, and this is exactly what they see. They talk about the primordial soup model in all of these textbooks. That's your question.
This is the primordial soup model. It just means some molecules in water. That's what it means.
Look, you were absolutely clueless on
James.
polypeptides. You never gave me
That's
the
a
coupling for that reaction.
deflection. Wait a
I want you
minute.
to know-
He wanted him to explain why he's telling people that the primordial soup model is literally a fully developed organism crawling out or slithering out of the soup, when that's not what the model shows, and he's just deflecting by writing clueless on the board. And then, yeah, for fuck's sake.
I'm going to narrate. This is my time now. I want you to notice he didn't answer the question. I invited him to come up to show me the chemistry, how this is done.
No,
he did not. He did not. And now you want me to say... So now
That flipped a switch, didn't it? Look at him. Here he goes.
It did.
He's losing it now.
And I want to almost call that the price of doing business, because I got to be honest, when Dave went into that, some of it felt like a bit too deep, right? It was like a bit too into their personal history and their personal back and forth. But it really wasn't. It was very quick hitting, just here's some stuff. But when it triggered him that much, it was like, oh, it was worth it. That was the right move. Yeah, that was the right move. See, sometimes it's how effective was it.
He never comes back down from this too. This is only 37.
Effective.
This is only 37 minutes, and this of a 2-hour debate. James never comes back down from this. This is his volume and everything for the rest of the debate.
Now, this is the question. The question is, I just told you the primordial soup model is nonsense, and this is in these textbooks, and this is taught over and over again.
Turning into slithering creatures is in textbooks? Show me the textbook. Show me the textbook that says molecules form into slithering creatures.
Because this is exactly the model that the molecules come together. These form higher organisms that come out of the water.
Molecules form higher organisms that come out of the water.
Yes.
Show me the textbook that
I don't have the textbook. Here they are. There they are. The smelly soup model. You have the list right there.
James, I showed
That's from my video. You have the list.
This is what the textbooks show. Ribozymes, autocatalysis, all the things that you pretend aren't real.
Go back to my slide. Go back to my slide.
So Mark Reed's talking about David's approach and wanting to point out the dishonesty of Dr. Tour when he should have been focusing on the science more. And there's valid criticisms we made there. But as I've been saying, I think that he was trying to make sure that people who are unfamiliar with the interactions that Tour and Farina have had about this very subject, he needed to lay down the groundwork that, these are things. The reason he's agreed to this debate is because these are things that he has already gone over with Dr. Tour and fallen upon deaf ears. Of course, I don't think Dave's performance here was perfect or flawless or anything. And my debate strategy is I'm a little more kid glove, I guess. But I don't know though. I laid into Mark Reed pretty good.
Well, yeah, I think you would have to go equally over the head of the audience and beyond the audience's training to really delve into the science. And, I always think that things appeal differently to different folks. I always have to admit that for a professional scientist, I'm not much of a science nerd, meaning I do science for a living. I don't, kick it and study up on unrelated fields in my spare time. But to somebody I imagine who really loves this stuff, there is a wealth there, right? There's this mountain of research that proves James' tour is absurd. And so you could just, you know, if you just jump into it a little bit, I know for the people that are into this science, there's so much there. And so I definitely think that that's true, right? I just wonder how you do it in a way that doesn't lose the audience, but also doesn't legitimize the red herrings of this person who really is a fraudulent actor. I mean, I'm always one to say you can walk and chew gum at the same time, but I also recognize it's easier said than done.
There. Yeah. Go back.
No, this
no,
is
no,
your
no,
vote.
no. Go one forward. You show the text. All right. Now don't change it. Now, which textbook were you referring? Because I said right there, it says miniature seed, prebiotic soup. Those are quotes from each one of those
And do they
books.
show
It's in there.
molecules forming a slithering creature? No, they don't, because that's a lie. And you're not going to run out the clock. How about the dozen people thing? Does that look like a dozen people to you?
What I meant by that, the number of people that are doing the complex organic Sutherland Pounder type synthesis. This is exactly
No.
what Benner told you.
No.
Benner told you
People
that
all
it's
over
a
the world.
very
Benner
small.
told me. I have
No,
hundreds of
Benner
papers.
told you on the video that there's a small number of people that are still doing the Sutherland type of complex synthesis.
All the time, Scott
Most
Duke.
Of the area is
Origin of
not
Life
doing that
community is a
anymore.
boutique community. It's a small number of people. It's a dozen people.
It was in
That's what you
reference
said.
to
No.
the number of people that are doing the complex Sutherland type
The
synthesis.
origin of life community. The origin of life community. You're talking about the field in general. How about the Bruce thing? This was pretty dumb, right? He just took one of the guy's videos and stuck it in.
Because when I
Why'd you do that?
contacted Bruce, Bruce said to me, I don't even know what you're talking about. I was unaware
Dave
of this.
asked me
He
to
said it
comment
in the
on
email.
some of your
You're not
writings,
showing the whole email.
and
I have
specifically about what we are doing. And does this show?
No, why don't you show the page? Why don't you
wrong?
show the page where he said, I
Does
had
this
no
show
idea that
prove
this
you
is
wrong?
there. Look, I published the whole email.
Yeah, and
you're only
here
showing
he
the one.
says that I asked for
No,
the
but
video,
it-
and he's talking about you. And then here you go.
No,
and
you don't want to show the one where he
just took
said,
one of the guy's
where he said,
videos
I
and
had
stuck
no
it in.
idea.
I think he should
You're
apologize.
not
for this.
going to address anything
All
online.
right,
This is
guys.
pretty-
See, this is where the moderator needed to step in and be like, "Okay, this is not moving forward. Let's get back on the topic of the debate." Something like that, right here, where it's like he said you lied. No, he said he did not. He said this, and just this whole back and forth exchange here, I don't think is very productive. I don't know about
No, and of course James Tour is happy to engage in anything unproductive because it's running out the clock. It's just running out the clock. Go ahead.
This was a pretty dumb
Let's
lie.
try
This
to
is a
have
really
a
malicious
dialogue
lie.
instead of people shouting at each other. So maybe take turns.
I think an apology is in order for this lie, James. Pretty dumb lie. Pretty dumb lie to tell. I think we can all agree that we are establishing the pathological nature of his lying. Well, then you're blind. He just took one of the guy's videos
Yeah,
and
let's-
stuck it in.
He's very nervous. It's like
back to
shaking.
the-
trembling. Did you see that?
Seconds left.
Which I mean, it happens when
Well, it
people are
doesn't
from
sound
large
like
people,
you
but that was
wanna get
definitely.
Okay, as far as this, he
Seemed
says
reactive.
that I called Jack Sostek a liar.
Yep.
I did. And Jack Sostek sent me an email. He said, you were pretty hard on me in that talk. And I said, Jack, I'd like to call you to apologize because I was wrong to do that. I said, give me your number. He gave me his number. I called him. We spoke about this. He said to me, Jim, if you would join us in this origin of life research, we would get this thing solved. We had a very
That
good
just-
conversation.
just
He
no way.
totally
Now-
made that up. Because if you had spoken to Jack
Now
Sostek,
what? Now what is
nobody
now
made me
again?
apologize to
You
him.
think
I offered
the
him my
guy who
apology
does this
and he
research
accepted it.
said
the
if
journal nature.
the
And I
guy who tells us to
apologized
just
to him.
stop, we're
And
done.
But you continue to
If we
call
just
his
called
work,
him, we'd figure it
utterly
out.
No, what did you call it? Ridiculous. Utterly
That's
ridiculous.
absurd.
Yeah, it is utterly ridiculous.
Yeah, but
when
it's
when he
not,
says he's going to
because-
have life in his lab.
Whoa,
in 3 to
who's
5 years
that?
in
Whoa, who's the
2014, and Now
hum?
he says, I can't even make the RNA.
There's-
That's my son, Ian.
They're making very
Hey.
good points.
Yeah.
Hey, you got
he's
them good genes from your mama, huh?
Talk about how handsome you are. He can't hear because I'm on the headphones.
Oh, okay.
But yeah, he did. Uh-huh. Yeah.
Who cares? You lied about this. Look, the structures are.
Oh, no. That slide, you can speak to Jack Sostek. He said to me, Jim, that slide was not well done. That was a copy from another article in Scientific
And yet the
American.
structures are
No,
correct.
Jack agrees with me. That was poorly done. There's no stereochemistry on
So
that sugar. When
it's
there's
an
no
article for ladies.
stereochemistry,
Okay, I'm
it's
going
not
to
ribose.
call
If
it
there's
close
no
to this part
stereochemistry,
of the
not
session.
ribose.
Let's move on. It's Dr. Tour's.
2 minutes to
Prerogative.
ask a question. Okay,
Right,
my
okay.
Are you
second
doing
question is,
timed?
Let's.
Did they say they're switching to timed responses? I missed that. Sorry.
Yeah, no, they were switching because that was supposed to be Dave asking a question to Tor, so now they're going to switch. So
Okay.
one thing I'll say is one of the problem here is as I see it, and it's something I don't know how we properly address from within science. To me, is an issue of motivation. I really do want to show a lot of respect to origins of life researchers because they do really important work. And I tried to even talk a little bit about the breadth of their field because, you know, it shows that there's a lot of potentially important knowledge and application here. But there's a certain mundaneness to this for most of us. Like when they say things like, oh, we don't have, you know, a biologically credible model to explain these things. Like, no, the truth is actually we have so many we have many credible models, often with the strong support for each of them that are often not mutually exclusive. And so people are exhausted with feasible options. There's an abundance of research showing, you know, synthesis of organic chemicals under prebiotic conditions. I mean, so what effectively happens is the people most motivated by these things are the people who are really interested in the applications or working out the minutia of it, right? And they're really weird apologetic opponents, right? Most people have moved on because, for instance, if you just accept the evidence, the overwhelming evidence we have for evolution, right? And the overwhelming evidence we have for deep time and, you know, the deep geological change on the Earth, right? Then you know we go from before we had really complex life, we had really simple life, and we go all the way back to when life was a single cell. Then we go way before that, we don't have any life. So unless we're gonna upset the entire apple cart of science, and I do frickin' mean all of it, we know that we go from prebiotic to biotic. We know that we go from inorganic chemistry to organic chemistry. The rest is just details, and most people are not that interested in the details. You know, if you take the evolutionary tree back further enough, frogs and chickens share a common ancestor. Now, how many of you want to dedicate the next 30 years of your life to figuring out exactly what that last common ancestor was, where it lived, what it ate, what its genes, like very few people, like very, very few people, because in the grand scheme of the scientific endeavor, it's on par with every other scientist who is working out the details of a very important yet narrowly prescribed field of research. And so there's a reason we're not making late night, you know, comedians making skits about the origin, because it's just not that interesting to most people. And so I want people to understand that it's not them that just doesn't understand this stuff. It's not even scientists that are like trying to blow this stuff off. It's just this is real deep in the weeds stuff for most of the scientific accepting public. We're like, cool, when y'all figure out something revolutionary, let us know. You'll show us good evidence for it and we'll accept it, moving on with our lives. Then you've got the apologists way out there on the other end who have a supernatural investment in denying this entire field. And then, so for the most of us, it just kind of falls on deaf ears. And that's really unfortunate because I'm realizing it allows them opportunities we're not comfortable with, but we also haven't figured out the incentive structure to address. Which is where science communicators come in, right? It's why Dave's work is really important. It's why Aron's work is really important, because a lot of lay people don't have the scientific background to address this stuff, and scientists are not rewarded for debating apologists, right? We don't get grant funding for this. We don't get teaching assignments to do this. It's just not, it's not a part of your job. It might be something you do in your spare time as a hobby, but even then, most of your guys like, I don't know why you waste your time with that. You know what I mean? Yeah,
for sure. That's why, I mean, and that's why communicators like HiveScience, Aron Ra.
Exactly. Yeah, Bree. You
That's-
gotta get, yeah, of course. I'm sorry, Bree. Of
That's
course.
yeah. That's
Goes
why we're
without
here,
saying.
because the people
Yeah.
actually doing the research in the field don't have time for this BS. Don't have time to debate Kent Hovind on whether or not the Earth's 6,000 years old. The rest of us who understand science and have the patience for it, or people who enjoy it like myself. I just like debunking bad science. It's just I get my kicks doing it. So
The good news. Go ahead.
So yeah, the people that are taking their time out, like Professor Dave, for making educational videos to address these things. It's a courtesy that he's offering us as a society. He's not getting paid for it.
Yeah, the good news is we're getting a lot better about scientific communication. People are basically realizing that we shouldn't separate out education from the scientific discipline. We should see educators as playing an important part of the discipline. So they should be doing more research so that they're bringing more research experience to their teaching, right? And we should also be celebrating in training researchers to teach and to do scientific communication. And so we're getting better about that. And I say that to say that I think I hope if you think an academic career is rewarding to you, I hope you continue to pursue one, because I think what you're doing is going to skip you to the front of the line, because now scientists have realized, holy crap, we're not all adequately tooled to do this. And most of the people we bring into our programs aren't either, right? But you, someone who's already doing this, you're already doing the scientific communication, you're already putting it out there, you're already educating people. So, that's super exciting. And I think Aron Ra's doing the same. I don't know if didn't he just finish a program?
Yeah,
or he's in a program.
He's got his
just got a
bachelor's.
master's. Okay, he got a bachelor's.
He's a bachelor's and he's in a master's program, I think.
Yes,
is the situation.
okay, yeah. I mean, he's someone, again, his ticket's going to write itself, because
Or no, maybe he did
he's
get his
already
master's.
doing...
He might have got his master's. Something. He's moving right along. Yeah. Dr. Aron Ra before too long.
Yes,
What got me
that'd
into
be
this, and what I want to voice before we close out here, because I'm about to wrap things up, and we'll pick this back up some other time probably, is that these people vote. These people sitting in the audience listening to James Tour, they vote, and they vote based on this. So that is why it's important to address this stuff, and why it's important to have people who kind of know what they're talking about debunk some of this bad science. Because if he's convincing people that abiogenesis is false, then evolution's false, then the only alternative is going to be Christianity in the public mind. So that's the whole point, is to try to retain power for this demographic that's through false narratives like this. We need to hit them where it hurts and destroy these things. Now they're losing hold. Younger creationism is fringe at this point, but yeah. And I want to be fair. I do understand people that want you to hit home on the science more, and maybe a different person having that debate would have taken a different tack than I'd see it and gone, oh, that was amazing. That was totally the way to go about it. But I do think, I almost look at it as, where's a person at right now? If you're committed to showing up, learning the truth, really learning the science, to me, you're maybe not even at this debate, or you're just watching it as a form of entertainment. You're taking science classes, or you're reading or watching science content creators, or reading science on the internet. In other words, you're educating yourself fine once you're motivated to get the real education. The issue with the James Tour crowd is they're not motivated to receive the science, or the science education, or the science communication as it is.
And so that's the bigger hurdle to overcome. Like, why aren't you a good student first? Once you become a good student, well, now I don't have to worry about the material so much because we already have good materials, right? And so I think what Professor Dave is really trying to do is undermine this authority figure in their life, get them to question who they listen to, why they listen to them, and should they really believe these people. Now, is that effective? Maybe it's not. Right? Maybe, honestly, maybe it's not, because maybe you don't spend as much time tearing down the science. So people are like, well, I don't really know much different now than I did then. And then maybe if they're too reluctant to let go of James Tour's authority, then all they heard was you bash the respectable, honest James Tour. And the man he shook your hand at the end and he gave you a painting at the beginning. What a jerk. Checkmate atheist. James Tour owned Professor Dave epic style. I didn't get that from it. I thought James Tour looked pathetic. I thought he embarrassed himself, his department, his institution. And if I were a James Tour fan, it would have made my skin crawl in a way that was maybe problematic and would have made me question my fanhood of James Tour. But I could just be assessing this from a very different place in life.
Yeah. All right, so I'm gonna wrap it up here for tonight. Jay,
Bree,
why
thanks
don't
for
you
having me. I'm sorry. I thought
why don't you
I
tell
had to get that in there.
Yeah, no, you get to thank me. Don't worry. Tell everybody where to find you, sweetie.
Pocket Locker 86 everywhere. jbundy.com if you do websites, but yeah, mostly we're on YouTube. Over at Pocket Locker 86, and come join us and gather offline, and we'll get you hooked up on the channel.
Yeah, we're actually probably going to head over to Gather from here to do just a little bit of hanging out before I go to bed for the night. So if you want to hang out with me, I don't know, somebody out there can drop the link for Gather, right?
Yeah, somebody can drop the link for Gather. I'm not sure if do you have the link? You can drop it. I don't mind. Do you want me to share it with you?
Yeah, I have it here. I can drop it.
Okay. Yeah, you can go ahead and drop it. So if you guys want to come to the post-show hangout, we'll do that.
Absolutely.
Big Bad Mama said, I have a PhD from Patriot Bible College. I got to get me one of those. I got to get me one of those.
Well, I've looked at getting my cryptozoology degree just for the shits and giggles of it, but they're actually they want a lot of money for me to study about Bigfoot, and I probably know more than...
Wouldn't you know those for-profit degree mills overcharged?
Yeah, well, the thing is I could probably teach every one of their damn classes. I've been doing CryptoCorner for Cryptic Corner for 100 episodes now. By the way, yeah, this Saturday, 100th episode of Cryptic Corner.
Wow,
let's celebrate.
Congratulations.
You thought I had a special guest tonight by sneaking Professor Dave in on you guys. I have another special guest for Saturday. It's already pre-recorded, so it's already finished. And this guest is going to be helping me out with Cryptic Corner. So.
Yeah, you got to tell me how you coordinated that with Trump's people. Sorry, I didn't mean to get
Trump's people.
But no, thanks also to Dave for stopping by, and Aron Ra. That was super cool. Super cool. Always to share a screen with those guys, and glad to hear some of their thoughts afterwards.
All right. Well, thank you for sticking around with me, Jay, until we get about, I don't know, halfway or so through the debate. But I appreciate Aron for showing up. I'm glad that's mainly what I wanted him for, was to be able to elaborate on his question and stuff that he had in the crowd. So absolutely appreciate him coming in. Dave agreeing to come in was a fantastic turn of events. You know, Absolutely. How people always ask, how do you get all these A-listers on your channel and whatnot? You know what I do? I ask.
Yeah.
That's all I had to do for Dave. I said, hey, me and Jay and Aron are reviewing your stream today. Then he's like, cool, there should be lots of fun material. And I'm like, yeah. And if Jay works in a lot of these labs that you talk about in some of your content, if you ever want to hang out and talk to him, he's like, yeah, shoot me a link, I'll come in. So he came in tonight just for Jay. So
I appreciate it. That was awesome. And I will say, I'm looking forward to, their discussion, the debate. Aron was there and Dave was obviously in it. And I have experienced this a little bit. Bree, I'm sure you will too, that when you do these debates, you do these discussions, it becomes an event in and of itself. And then everybody's talking about it. And then you have a whole new experience, not just being there, but then having watched and listened to everybody talk about it afterwards. So it'll be interesting to hear Dave's kind of perspective on all that. And I think for you and I, it's an indication of what happens when we do these type of things. So we can learn from that.
Yep. All right. So with that, I'm going to tell everybody to take care and be kind, and we will see you next time.
See you later. Said I'm gone.